Guys, listen to some blues riff and B. Watch me for the changes and try and keep up, okay?
All right. How's everybody doing tonight?
Hey, Doug. Good to see you.
All right. Well, welcome to the stream here. We have an awesome show tonight. We're going to continue our coverage of the Kennedy Era of LucasFilm, which has been extreme highs and some extreme lows, and it's about to get a lot lower here as we go into the years between 2022 and 2023. We saw the excitement and the takeover as Disney transferred, as Lucasfilm transferred over to Disney. We saw the Lucasfilm turn against the fans, and then we saw the Civil War settle in between Jon Favreau's camp and the Kennedy camp as two different visions for Lucasfilm and Star Wars took hold. And now this Civil War is going to deepen because it's already gotten bad. And through these 2 years, the outside world, some of this stuff spills out into the outside world, and Disney is starting to have some problems, and so is Lucasfilm. And I call this episode Order 66 because so many people ended up getting purged through this these 2 years. And we already saw the first victim last discussion with Gina Carano. So in these 2 years, we're going to see a lot more people inside the company get kind of removed one way or the other. Some people are going to force their way back in, as we'll cover. And we're going to start to see a possible picture of what's been going on behind the scenes. And Kamran has some speculation and some ideas and some insight as to what some of that is going to look like as well. We will also get into the expansion of the live action Disney or live action Star Wars on Disney Plus. We had the Mando, which was a mostly successful launch into the live action streaming platform. And now we're going to start to see some swings and misses on some subsequent shows. We also will get another foray into theme parks. Galaxy's Edge was already a mixed bag, if not a misfire. And Disney and Lucasfilm are going to double down where that is concerned. So that's what's set up for us today. Real quick, why don't we go around the horn and everyone can introduce themselves. Lance, let's start with you.
Yeah, hello. You won't have me for too long today because I'm feeling a little bit ill, which is why I'm not on camera. So my apologies. That's why I wasn't here last week. But yeah, I'm really interested in talking about Boba Fett because, as you know, I'm an independent film director. And when I was young, my big ambition was to direct a Star Wars movie, and I always wanted to direct the Boba Fett feature film, and I wrote down a whole load of like story ideas to pitch if I ever got the chance for that. So I'll tell you about that when we come to it. So I was really keen to see the Boba Fett series. I've got lots of thoughts on that series. And then the other thing I did when I was younger was I used to run a Star Wars live role-playing experience, you know, with kind of the laser tag system and lots of Star Wars costumes and sets and things. And so, of course, when they were doing the Galaxy's Edge Hotel, that was a real interest to me because I thought, wow, this is like kind of what I used to do when I was in my 20s for everybody. We used to run these games, except with a really big, expensive set, you know. and I thought it was going to be really cool. And well, we'll get onto it. But yeah, so those two topics are something I'd really like to contribute sunning on, and then I think after that I should probably go to bed.
Yeah, definitely take care of yourself. We're all interested in hearing your thoughts on this, because I know you've been pretty deep, especially with like LARPing and the role playing thing, with which the Galactic Starcruiser had so much promise for, but not in execution. Heath, what about you?
So my name is Heath Robinson. You can find me primarily on the Heath's Geekverse YouTube channel. We're streaming there every Sunday and Wednesday mornings talking about tabletop gaming, but also the Table Talk channel, where we talk about storytelling, movies, all of that. Doug has been on the channel. Retro Nerd Girl's been on the channel. Cameron's been on the channel, which is how a lot of us have connected. So the Table Talk, look up Table Talk Geekverse and you'll find it. But also, I have been hitting TikTok hard lately, and we're going to do that a lot more in the future. So look up Heath's Geekverse on TikTok and you will find me.
Awesome. And Kamran, you want to introduce yourself and let people know where they could find you?
Yeah. I'm Kamran Pasha. I'm a screenwriter, director, producer. I've been working in Hollywood for 24 years, done a lot of television, have been speaking the last several years a lot on things that are happening in Hollywood, particularly at Lucasfilm, which is one of the reasons I hope that I have a little bit of insight. We're talking about today. I think we did an episode last week that I think we got really deep into what was happening. We're going to build on that. And best way for people to reach out to me and connect with me is through my Patreon, which I know the link will be thrown. It's Patreon/my name, Kamran Pasha. And it's a great way for you to get my take on events that are happening in Hollywood, and every now and then some interesting scoops and some scoop confirmations. We had some scoops come out in the last few weeks that were confirmed today. Lucasfilm, with the new announcement of this new Tales. Star Wars Tales of the Underground, which is looking at some of the criminal activity, the bounty hunters, whatever. I had reported that just a few weeks ago that was something like that was coming, and now it's been released. So you can get some stuff, and you can even get some consulting chances to consult with me on your screenplays or books if you are a budding writer or filmmaker. So that's me.
Yeah, and I fully endorse it. I have worked with Kamran on the writing side. He's helped me on numerous occasions, pretty much fine tune my most recent book. And then also I'm working on a screenplay. He's helping me with that. So I can attest to the kind of quality of feedback you can get from Kamran. And his Patreon is excellent. One thing that differentiates Kamran from other commentators on YouTube is Kamran is an insider. He works in the industry. He doesn't react. He doesn't simply react to news. He tries to interpret the news and understand it and make sense of it. And that's something he shares with myself and all of us on Patreon, and also some of these YouTube channels that he appears on. So much better than just reaction, in my opinion.
Thank you.
And then last, but certainly not least, Retro, you want to tell us about yourself and where people can find you?
Yes, you can find me on YouTube or X. I am Retro Nerd Girl, and I do a lot of research and reviews on older movies. I love older movies, so I dive in pretty deep on them. I also do movie talks where I kind of go off the script and really dive deep into a movie or a project or a character. And then I have watch parties every Saturday of an old movie, and it is always a lot of fun. So I'm doing a lot of stuff that I really love doing. But to deal with this particular subject matter, I do watch a lot of the channels and all the talk about modern cinema. So I'm always abreast of what's going on.
Right. Retro is excellent. I'll put all the links in the description below. So if you're interested in listening and hearing more from any of our guests, please subscribe to their channels or join their Patreon, and you can get the inside scoop there. So let's get into it here. Order 66, 2022 to 2023. Last week we left off with Spider-Man No Way Home, which might sound a little counterintuitive, but Jon Favreau, who was the other member of this Lucasfilm Civil War, was involved in Spider-Man No Way Home, and there seemed to be a very clear Easter egg with the little Lego Emperor that he intended to fix Star Wars. And I think personally that he cared about Star Wars and intended to do it some justice. And I think he got off on the right foot with Mando and the Mandalorian, which launched Disney Plus, and he ran afoul with, this is my opinion and what I believe, he ran afoul with the Kennedy camp because he did not tell her that he was going to bring Luke Skywalker back at the season finale of Mando season 2. And this caused quite a stir and pretty immediately resulted in the firing of Gina Carano, which threw all future plans out the window. So this era here is the resettling, the repositioning of the Civil War, with Kennedy now fully alert, fully active, and both visions competing. And I'll lay out my case. I think Kennedy really takes the lead through this, and Favreau is going to be kind of sidelined to some extent, but certainly not out of the discussion here. So I don't know how many people remember, but we were promised.
I remember this.
Yes, just a
I
lot of
remember
content. So, I mean, it was I remember laughing at this because, it seemed like anyone who had a role in Star Wars was going to get their own series. It seemed ludicrous. Now we have to go back to 2022. Andor was going to get a series. This like side character from a spin-off film, Rogue One. Ahsoka, a character that few people knew about, was going to get her own series. The Bad Batch side characters from the Clone Wars. Lando was going to get a series. The droids were going to get a series. Obi-Wan Kenobi was going to get a series. Cara Dune was going to get a series. Honestly, this seemed comical to me. Heath, let's start with you. What was your how did you take all this glut of content that was promised?
Well, I remember a lot of stuff coming, and one of my thoughts was that sometimes things are better when you imagine them. This was supposed to be originally there would be like a movie every year or whatever. Okay, and then that got disrupted because of Solo, and then here we are. But TV shows are a lot more than movies. And, I thought this is going to be a lot to follow. And that has been the case. I mean, it's been a lot for me to follow. I haven't followed it all. And also I end up hearing that from other people as well. Like there's too much. So, I mean, there's going to be a lot. But, I remember there being a time when you're like, there are 3 movies. And so we are all deeply into those 3 movies and everyone knows everything about them. The problem always is when you start to expand and you start, now there's going to be, 20 times as much material. Can people follow that? So I remember thinking about that when I saw all of this.
Yeah. Kamran, what was your take as someone who works in the industry? When you hear an announcement of this scope and scale, what was your initial reaction to this?
My initial reaction is this just throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks. I mean, this is not the action of someone who is confident that they know what they're doing, right? It's one of the things that I've learned through making this mistake is pitch projects to a potential buyer. I once made the mistake of coming in with a book of, I've got this script and I've got this series and I've got this thing and I've got that thing, and then their eyes just glaze over because they don't know what to focus on. They don't know what you're here to sell. They don't know what they should buy, and you've got 7 great ideas that suddenly it dilutes all of how great each of them is. So suddenly you've got 7 mediocre ideas as far as they're concerned, right? Because if you come in with 3 pitches and one of them is superb, it stands out. You come in with 8 brilliant pitches, they all just they don't sound Emmy Oscar level because there's 8 of them, right? It's just human psychology.
It's like the principle of inflation. The more you put out there, the less scarcity, the lower the value to each individual thing becomes. And just by glancing this over, a lot of this never came to pass. Rangers of the New Republic torpedoed with the firing of Gina Carano. Rogue Squadron, Patty Jenkins got fired. I don't know about Droid's story. Acolyte took 5 years to get out there, and it was a disaster. Should have never been made. Lando never came out. Visions, it's a mixed bag. Some people really like it, but it's it could be a hit or miss type of thing.
Sure.
And Bad Batch I liked, but it's certainly a niche audience within the Star Wars community.
Yeah, and so this is what this shows is a leadership without a vision. Has no idea where it's going, right? And there's also it's servicing multiple agendas. Right, you see things like there's the Jean Favreau agenda, which is Rangers and Mandalorian and Ahsoka as well, right?
Ahsoka, yeah,
and you know, and I think Obi-Wan, a Bad Batch. I think the Kennedy, but she's not going to let him take all the sign. So she's inserting her garbage acolyte. She's inserting Lando. She's inserting Rogue Squadron. That was her baby. And you know, and I think Andor can fairly be said to be her baby, right? I think probably, I think most of Ms. Kennedy's reign has been disastrous, but I think Rogue One, whether she could take credit for it or not, was a good movie, and I think Andor ended up being a good series, whether she is responsible for that or not. But even if someone who's terrible, broken clock can be right a couple times, and so, but so these are the political. This is what's happening here is that these are two powerful people jockeying for the attention of the fans and trying to lobby for support for their projects. That's what this is.
Right. And as we've seen from our last discussion in 2021, I believe it was, Kennedy, what part of Kennedy's strategy in terms of fighting this power struggle is behind the scenes, like not funding marketing campaigns, firing the lead actress, pretty Machiavellian style strategy. So she's not necessarily competing on the screen with better stories. This is all behind the scenes, all leveraging influence and power in order to, in my opinion, sabotage competing visions.
Yeah, exactly. She couldn't use that energy to make anything herself. She's not able to create, right? So like I said, so she can get lucky, in a couple of instances, but she's not able to create. She is able to destroy, and so she uses that. And so she's, well, I'm going to use that against my rival, which is what happened to several of these shows.
Right. And Retro, what was your take? Did any of these excite you when you saw them, or did it seem like too much? Like, where were you with this?
Well, now that I know a little bit more about the business, at least like from my point of view, what I can see, this looks just like a chess game. Okay. This is strategy. You put out the name of something and then see if people will like it. Will you like, the Obi-Wan Kenobi movie? And just to see who is going to bite, who is going to bite this. Are the fans excited about this? And you'll see tons and tons of articles and Variety and all, just like, there's this new. So this is more like promotions, to get the word out. Also, there's the shareholders. I remember, like, around the time when the shareholder meetings were happening, it was like, all of a sudden you get these like announcements out of nowhere. So this was definitely a play. It wasn't real, but I think to see what was going to take hold and what they could really actually develop.
Well, and we got round one, Mandalorian, which I would argue at this point, through 2 seasons, was very successful. So very successful launch with The Mandalorian, their first show on that list. And not only was it successful, but season 2 ended with one of the most unifying, thrilling endings possible with the return of Luke Skywalker from Return of the Jedi. So, at this point, I think fans were willing to give this a chance.
Yes, mostly positive responses. People were really excited for almost all of the things that were on that list. Like, they were very excited.
And now, but we don't want to forget that there was a Book of Boba Fett teaser at the end of Mandalorian season 2.
Oh, that's right. He takes like the throne, right?
Right. Yes, exactly. So, and I remember, so there was the high of Mandalorian season 2, and then there was that teaser at the end, and I was like, oh my God, I'm all in. Like, at that moment, I was all in, because I remember we had the high of season 2. Then there was this cool teaser of the Book of Boba Fett. Now, it took a while to get to it, which cooled it off, which I guess we can talk about. But, at the time, there was that teaser, and like, oh my God, there's going to be a Boba Fett show. That was a big deal. I remember that that was something also that I shared with people, that if they had not seen that, it was like an after credit scene or something like that. I mean, it was like an after credit scene of Mandalorian season 2. Here is your teaser of the Book of Boba Fett. I was like, let's go.
Right. Yeah. And this was in the wake of Marvel, right? Marvel's success from Endgame. I remember Endgame came out, it was over. And then they announced all these new shows, starting with WandaVision and all this. So I feel like Star Wars tried to emulate that moment. Like, we're going to get Loki, we're going to get WandaVision, we're going to get all these great shows. And, they really diluted their brand. I do believe
Could you put the previous picture back so I could offer something on that?
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, because you missed me out. I didn't tell you what I thought of it.
Oh, well, I was going to give you the floor for Boba Fett, but go ahead. What was your take here?
I'll tell you, my single thought when I saw this was, this looks like a really cool limited edition coaster set for Star Wars.
Yeah, it's just a bunch of logos, right?
Yeah, and I thought, this looks like something you'd get at a convention. Hey, look, this is a really cool coaster set for when your buddies come around to watch Star Wars. We got these kind of cool Star Wars themed logos, and actually, this is the sort of thing I would expect to see. The Star Wars comics were, pretty big, and Rogue Squadron was a Star Wars comic, and it was a good one. I think I've got the first 10 issues of that, and the stories were good and focused on Wedge, I think, predominantly, if I remember rightly.
Which makes sense.
So I was quite excited for Rogue Squadron because that's a show that's going to be predominantly set in space, and that sounded kind of cool.
I agree.
But when I saw all this stuff, and I think my first thought was, I don't think you can do with Star Wars what they're doing with the Marvel universe. And by this time, Marvel was already overloading, and everybody was kind of getting a bit bored. So right. I just thought, no, I don't want them to put out too much too fast in the same way, because the quality is definitely going to drop. And well, hey, proof of the pudding. It
drops.
That's all I've got to say on that.
Yeah, well, that's a great point. Yeah, these look like bumper stickers, or
they do.
You're right.
Yeah, bumper stickers.
Pins. Well, so we're going to get a continuation. Lucasfilm Star Wars live action is going to take one of the more mysterious characters who everybody loved. This character was a hit. I think that the artistic design of this thing. I watched a documentary that was detailing Boba Fett, and he came out before Empire. He wasn't in A New Hope. In the original, he wasn't in it. He showed up first in Empire Strikes Back. And there was a parade where someone dressed up as this character before the public had ever seen him. It was before Empire Strikes came out. It was like a promotional parade. And people loved Boba Fett even then, without any understanding of who this character was. He was just following Darth Vader around in this parade. So people flocked to this character. And here we're gonna realize, we're gonna see firsthand why sometimes mystery is better. That
I completely agree.
Right? You don't need to go under every rock with every character. And this should be a hallmark example of, if Boba Fett was better when we didn't know much about him.
Absolutely.
Secondly, they did not have a good story for this. And the behind the scenes battling between Kathleen Kennedy, this is my take on this, between Kathleen Kennedy and John, because this was a Jon Favreau project. He's credited for writing this and, doing some of the background work on this. So, we thought we're in good hands here, but you could definitely see where this show got sabotaged. Cara Dune wasn't in it like he had planned. There's a bunch of cameos that show up in this. Some of the episodes weren't even Boba Fett. So, Lance, do you want to walk us through this? Yeah, Book of Boba Fett. What went wrong?
I was expecting to. First of all, I thought the show was going to be his life before Empire Strikes Back, which would have been the logical place to start. And I think that would have been a really interesting show. I don't think we needed to know where he came from. It's a bit like Judge Dredd with Boba Fett. The less you see him with his helmet off, the better. All right.
Right.
And I think we could have had a Boba Fett show where we don't, even if we do see him take his helmet off, we don't need to see his face, because the actor was a bit old to play him at this point, which basically what happened as a result of that was, instead of getting a cool Boba Fett show where he's going on adventures, he's being cool, he's doing all his stuff with his gadgets, he's besting people, you kind of got Boba Fett the granddad years. That's what this show is. It's Boba Fett the granddad years. Boba Fett's not particularly fast. He's a bit sluggish. Now, that of itself isn't a write-off premise, but it's not what you want to see. We've all been waiting for either a Boba Fett movie, like I said I wanted to make that movie, and I had a great plot for it all worked out, involving all the other bounty hunters that you momentarily see in Empire Strikes Back. That was going to be my Boba Fett movie, that they were all after the same gig, and he was having to outwit and fight all those other bounty hunters. And we did see
cool.
we did see IG-88 turn up in one of these shows, and that was kind of cool. But yeah, I mean, but what we got was this guy he became a secondary character in his own show as well, which was unforgivable. And it was just all a bit naff, really. I mean, there were some bits and pieces in it that were okay, and I didn't mind some of the storylines. You know, like him killing a big sandworm thing that was bothering a town. That could have been a mission he may well have accepted as a side quest at some point, but it just didn't feel like the Boba Fett show or movie that we'd all been waiting so long to see. I wanted to see him do cool shit, like in Return of the Jedi, you know, wrap people with his wire thing and do cool stuff on his jetpack and outwit other bounty hunters. I really wanted it to be a show about bounty hunters dealing with other bounty hunters and going after bounties. That's what I would have expected in a
and that's the way it was kind of sold to the public, I would say, in the early goings. That you know, this is Boba Fett, cartel leader. You know, he's like the Godfather. He was going to be the head of he was going to be a kingpin style character on Tatooine, which is already a place of scum and villainy. That's where Jabba dwells. And then as they started to play it out, it was like you could tell that Disney was like, we don't want any bad stuff. So they're like, okay, how about an evil kingpin who wants to do good? And it's like, well, then he's not really an evil kingpin. He's
not a kingpin.
Right?
He's just a businessman at that point.
Yeah.
He was never a character that I wanted to see turn into an anti-hero. The same, you know, Han Solo is the great archetype of an anti-hero. Right. This guy is a bad guy. He's a villain. And we already know that his moral compass is basically money. Give me the big job. And yeah, okay, eventually he could have got to the stage where he was going to effectively retire and be more like the guy who runs the show. And okay, if you want to use that actor, maybe that works as a setup. If you have really great stories, you know, and put him in really difficult positions where he has to sacrifice men and all this kind of thing, maybe he starts losing his wealth. I don't know. They could have taken it so many other directions. What we got was a mess.
Well, I've never, to be honest, I don't think I've ever seen another TV show that was so mixed up and dicey for so many reasons. So you had other characters coming into the show, which seemed really cool. So you had like our first appearance, by the way, of Rosario Dawson as Ahsoka Tano comes in. We get more Mark Hamill, or de-aged Mark Hamill. We saw him at the end of Mando season 2, and he kind of shows back up, and it was a little underwhelming this time. And I don't know if you guys remember, but there was a big debate at the time. Luke was going to take Grogu and make him a Jedi. That's how Mando season 2 ended. You know, Mando handed over Grogu to Luke, and Luke was going to train him. And then suddenly there was this choice that was presented in front of Grogu, and I had such a problem with this, but he had to choose whether he was going to be a Jedi or a Mandalorian. And I'm scratching my head. I was like, Grogu as Mandalorian. It was hard to visualize. But the big debate, I don't know if you guys remember this, was if Luke trains Grogu, then that changes the timeline for the sequel trilogy. Because Grogu was never mentioned. It was Ben Solo. It was different people in the sequel trilogy that Luke trained for his first Jedi. So this was considered almost like a Trojan horse for decanonizing or altering the sequel trilogy simply by Luke training Grogu. And then suddenly that we're presented with this choice, is he going to be a Jedi or a Mandalorian? And the fandom was pretty sure he was going to pick Jedi, because being a Mandalorian doesn't even make any sense, it seemed.
That
Cameron,
costume looks like that looks like a Star Trek original series Romulan costume. So it looks like he's about to choose to become either a member of the Romulan Empire or a Jedi. Doesn't I don't know.
Those Romulans in the original series were quite good looking, man. They were attractive. They were good looking.
They had that kind of scaly costume, didn't they?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they had that sort of scaly bodysuit as their costume.
Yeah.
So
it's maybe the metaphor in this message is: do you want to leave this show and go to be on Star Trek, or do you want to stick it out and see what happens?
Yeah, Star Trek was in the middle of its own sinking ship.
Indeed. Poison Chalice there for this, there was one.
Cameron, do you remember this big debate at the time that this was a backdoor way to maybe get around the sequel trilogy that Favreau was engineering?
Well, I'm sure he was engineering. He's been trying to put this stuff in. Remember, he's still not solidified his power here, despite the success of The Mandalorian, right? He keeps every step dealing with Kennedy for years is one step forward, two steps back, right? I mean, it's constant. It's constant. Like he pushes forward, finds himself in a worse position than when before he tried, right? And that's the situation of this show, because the show is starting off on the wrong foot. From everything I was told, this show was a scrambled last-minute effort because they lost Gina Carano, who's going to play a major role in the show, so they had to revamp the scripts. There were holes in the story, so they had to steal from other scripts that were already existing for Mandalorian, which created holes in the Mandalorian, which then threw the Mandalorian off. And, it felt haphazard because there was a bunch of stuff they wanted to do that was thrown together, right, because of that situation. And, I think that on the specific issue of the choice, I think it was always a false choice. I think the fans were kind of deluding themselves from a practical perspective. On a practical perspective, Grogu is a moneymaker, right? And there is no Luke Skywalker show yet. And so far there hasn't been, even though I've been told that he's been, Favreau's long-term goal is to create a Luke Skywalker Jedi Academy show. But he certainly didn't have the power to do so at this time with Kathleen Kennedy, standing over him with a red lightsaber. And so the toy, Grogu is the best-selling toy they've got out of this new world, and that's in the Mandalorian franchise. To remove him from the Mandalorian would sink the toys, right? He needs to be constantly visible. This was never a real choice. From a writer's perspective, I could see this was a false choice. This was, and you could see the setups that the ship he was going to use had that little section in the back that you could then revamp to fit Grogu in, right? They were already, the plan was there was never this possibility, but the fans, partly because most of them are not screenwriters, and they actually, for all their critique of us screenwriters and the work that Lance does, they can't actually do it because they can't see this coming. Like a screenwriter sees this coming, right? They couldn't see it coming. They can't foreshadow.
This is the main reason why when I saw Luke Skywalker at the end of season 2, I was like, oh, snap, this is gonna take everything down, because the reason why a lot of people had even known about The Mandalorian was because of Grogu. And even though the show is fantastic, Mandalorian himself is amazing. The stories are really great. Grogu was sort of this thing no one has ever seen before, and they fell in love with it, and so when you've got a show that actually says, hey, this character you like, we're going to take them away, and you're not going to see them, that's trouble. You've written yourself into a corner. And so here we have them trying to undo all of that in Boba Fett and also in Mandalorian season 3, which was dismal. But to say, see this picture right here? I love this picture right here. I love seeing them together, but it's not working the way the way they wrote it. It just didn't work.
So do you guys remember? So if I'm just going back and remembering a little bit, there was supposed to be a Boba Fett show, which I heard they took the Boba Fett show and changed it to become The Mandalorian. So
there was a Boba Fett.
They wanted a new character.
There was a Boba Fett movie originally that would transform into a Boba Fett proposed show. I know because I worked with writers that were supposed to be on that Boba Fett show. All right. On one of my shows, they were working and they had actually been brought on. They saw the scripts for it, and then it got pulled because of the always constant changing internal politics of Lucasfilm. And so they were telling me at the time how disappointed they were, because they were like everyone else. Everyone, like Lance said, everyone wants to work on Star Wars. That's the thing that got all of us into this business, right? And so that was their big moment. And these were coworkers of mine on a subsequent series, and they were like, damn it, we were so close. And then yes, it became The Mandalorian because Favreau's like, yeah, some of that stuff was actually pretty good. Can I use it? Right.
And but it presented a strange circumstance where Disney show number 1 on Disney Plus, or the first is The Mandalorian. The second show is about a Mandalorian. So you literally are duplicating. They're very similar characters on some level. They're both bounty hunters. They're both Mandalorians. One's green, the other is more silver. So there's a lot of similarities. So there was this problem of them being kind of like, the way I see it is, The Mandalorian was a revamped Boba Fett project, and then the next project was a Boba Fett project. So, you had this strange kind of duplicative issue, and this was completely exacerbated by the fact that The Mandalorian comes into the book of Boba Fett. Yes. I mean, I'm sure everyone here remembers. I remember watching it, and there's this opening scene in one of the episodes. I forget which one, but it's like a cooler of some kind, like a meat locker or something. And then there's Mandalorian. I'm like, oh, they're bringing the Mandalorian into Book of Boba Fett. I was really excited. And then about 20, 30 minutes in, I was like, where's Boba Fett? And then like the episode ended and there was one quick shot of Boba Fett. And I was like, okay, this is a mistake. Yeah. They put an episode of The Mandalorian in place of an episode of Book of Boba Fett. Is what I think happened. Which is what happened because I told you they ran out of stuff because they were desperately trying to Jenga it without Gina Carano. They're like, "What? All right, well, let's take that episode from The Mandalorian and we'll put it in here because that was clearly an episode of The Mandalorian." I
remember when that happened. I remember because I did not start the Book of Boba Fett as soon as it began on Disney Plus, but I was still, of course, scrolling YouTube, saw lots of things like that. So the thumbnails about what's going on with Book of Boba, and it was like a roller coaster. It was a roller coaster going on. And it was up, it's down, it's up, it's down. Is this a good show? Is this a bad show? Whatever. And I was like, oh, and then, there's like, oh my God, look what just happened. And I was like, okay, I've got to watch this show. I was, working. And so I turned it on. So I was a few episodes behind, but it was the same thing, that like, Boba Fett's going on, but then all of a sudden the music for The Mandalorian hit when that episode came on. And I was like, whoa, hold on. And I because I was working as I was watching, and I stopped everything I was doing. I was like, whoa, wait a minute, what's going on? To turn to watch the TV when that was, I was like, that was an episode of The Mandalorian, because The Mandalorian music hit, the theme hit, all of that. That was a major moment. It was wrong, to be in the middle of the Boba Fett show. But I remember when that hit, when everybody was so high, they're like, oh my God, The Mandalorian's back. I was like, okay, I got to watch this.
And I'll just like to interject one thing. This would have worked so much better if it was like a movie special. Just a movie, an hour, 30 minutes of Boba Fett that they,
I agree.
As the special, instead of trying to stretch out a whole series, because that's the problem with a lot of these horrible shows is that they stretched it out for 6 or 8 episodes, and they really should have been only an hour and 30 minutes.
Yeah, and the storytelling was rough in Book of Boba Fett. It was all over the place. And I remember there were so many like disappointments. One, this was a Favreau production, and I still believe in Jon Favreau. But so it was hard to see something that he was really attached to come out so messy. And I remember right away, I was like, it's messy because I feel like Kathleen Kennedy is interfering. And maybe I'm making that up in my head, but that's what it seemed like to me. It seemed like there was interference from someone who wasn't appreciative of this show and was definitely trying to work against them. And I was also disappointed in Robert Rodriguez. He was directing an episode.
Oh, yeah.
And his stock is high. Remember these guys, Lance?
Oh yeah, the comedy Vespers. And this was I don't know if you guys are familiar with the mods and rockers culture in the UK, or if you've seen the film Quadrophenia, but somebody clearly had, and we used to have these things called Vespa bikes that very popular in Italy in the 50s and 60s, and they were adapted by the mods, and the mods would fit them all out with all these really flash kind of handlebars. And if you look at the blue one, it's got a huge unnecessary number of lights. And if you look at the cover of the movie Quadrophenia, you'll see the actor, is it Phil Daniels, sitting on the bike, and it's a very similar bike to that with about 20 unnecessary sort of these lights and reflectors on the front. So somebody kind of took those, and I mean, listen, you know, these bikes of themselves wouldn't have been a problem if they were in a show that was really cool, and then you would have thought, oh yeah, okay, that's kind of
That's
fun.
not called Star Wars.
Right.
but it did. These didn't really feel like Star Wars to me. This felt like this was in another film, you know, like I just felt, I'm trying to think of which one but maybe not Last Starfighter, but it just felt like it was in the wrong movie. I'll tell you what these would have been in. These would have been in, kids would have had these in Back to the Future 2. That's where these,
Yeah, that would work.
that's where these would have been parked up outside the cinema showing Jaws 19 or whatever.
One step above hoverboards.
Yeah, and this would have been the bikes for, you know, kind of teenagers and in Back to the Future 2. But in Star Wars, they just kind of felt wrong, and this gang of kids, oh man, they felt like they're in another movie as well.
Yeah, this was a misfire. It seemed like a rushed idea, like something that no effort, they just didn't have the time to put any effort into it. They threw it in there and just crossed their fingers that maybe fans will like this, or maybe we'll sell merch on this. Who knows? It didn't happen. Kamran, I know you did like a couple episodes of the Book of Boba Fett. I think you like the later ones, right?
I like the finale. And look, I had a problem with the very beginning for the reasons that Lance said. The character, the transformation of Boba Fett from the last minutes of Return of the Jedi to, you know, a few days later, he's coming out of the Sarlacc pit, a changed man, right? You know, I mean, that's not enough character journey for that guy. The last time we saw him, he was trying to kill Han Solo and Luke Skywalker. Right. I mean, that's the dude we saw 48 hours later. He was coming out and trying to help this other guy and trying to help the kid. That's not the Boba Fett that people fell in love with, which is this ruthless, amoral bounty hunter who had no fear, that literally only Vader could control. Right.
Yes.
Vader's the only guy that had any power over him. Right. He had no ball. He had the balls to go to Vader. It's like, you know, if he dies, I'm going to lose money. How are you gonna fix that, right? You have the balls to say that to Vader's face or mask. And so they didn't think that out. The issue with the Vespa stuff and all this Rodriguez stuff, again, now let me bring in what I heard from my sources about the politics of what was happening. Not only was there this drama of Carano being pulled out, so they're desperately jengaing things and throwing out scripts and bringing in scripts and doing stuff. There was, if you recall, there was something happening at the same time. We had Bob Chapek was still CEO of Disney at the time.
Right.
At the time, it was announced that Chapek was going to give Jon Favreau certain advisory, capacities throughout Disney.
Yeah.
It was the same time. So suddenly Chapek is bringing Favreau in as a consigliere to all of his stuff. He wanted him as a sort of right-hand creative guy. So Favreau is seeing that this would help him overthrow Kennedy, right? So he's like, I'm going to go down the CEO's path and I'm going to become the CEO's friend. So he basically, and then they had a respected filmmaker, Robert Rodriguez, and he's like, you deal with this. I'm going to go. You guys, you and Dan, whatever, all you guys, De Filoni, you all figure the script situation out. I gotta go hang out with the CEO of Disney and become his buddy and see what else I can do to solidify my power, right? And then he's away for a few weeks or months doing that, only to see this thing getting derailed because Rodriguez goes, oh, this is a great chance for me to do Spy Kids 7. Right, which is what he did, right? So Rodriguez wasn't thinking in terms of Star Wars. He was thinking in terms of what he knew, which is Spy Kids. But this is essentially, these bikes would work in a Spy Kids kind of thing. These are like older version of Spy Kids, right? And and so it's like and then Favreau comes back and what the hell's going on here? And what's going on? He's like looking at the stuff. This is the intel I got from my sources. He's like, what the hell is all this stuff? I mean, this isn't what I thought you were going to do with it, right? Because there's only so much time anybody has. Favreau can't be running around with Bob Chapek everywhere, looking at other stuff, looking at Indiana Jones, looking at stuff, because he was supposed to be like, come look at stuff at Marvel. That was the kind of role he was being given, right? and he took it. So then he's not going to be able to focus on what's happening here. And he trusted that these people without him would fix these problems, and they didn't, and they made them worse. And so my understanding is he came back and goes, "What the hell is this stuff? All right, now this isn't what I wanted to do. All right, now we got to fix it." So I think he basically came in, from what I understand, near the finale and started trying to bring it back to what he wanted to do, which he thought these guys wanted to do. And so I thought the finale was decent because it's back in the Rancor, and then there was a good fight. A good fight with Boba Fett's fighting and Amando's fighting, and and I thought it was actually pretty good. Literally, when I wrote on my Patreon that I liked the finale, I lost 50 subscribers from Patreon within 15 minutes. People quit.
I remember that, Cameron.
Yeah, people started sending me DMs. You're a shill for Disney. You support any garbage they make. I was like, dude, I didn't like this show. I liked the finale. I can't say that. I mean, the finale was I thought fun. There were moments I jumped up and down and clapped in the finale, like with the Rancor fight or whatever. That's what you want in a Star Wars. You want to jump up and down and clap in your living room at a Star Wars show. I mean, I didn't do that for most of this show. I didn't even do that when Luke showed up because it was done, like you said, very placidly. But I like that final battle was kind of cool. That's when Favreau came back and said, "All right, fine. You can't do this without me. I will help you." Right? And and that's what happened here. You see, this is the Lucasfilm without Favreau, certainly at this time, had no bones to it. Literally, this was a system that couldn't work. And if Favreau took his eyes off of it for a second, it would collapse, which is what we saw, right? And then the ramifications are the next season, Mando screwed up because they took several of the scripts out. They're like, well, how do we fill that? Well, Kennedy's like, hey, what about Jack Black and that other chick or whatever? Why don't you put them in there? Fine, Kathy. We'll put her in there, right? Because he's got to keep her happy, right? And so it's this whole thing was a disaster that came out of Carano, and the fact that Favreau was distracted with this Chapek thing, right?
Well, and your fans are seeing this sort of like schizophrenic show, and we're seeing it. So I remember we're sitting back and being like, man, all is not well at Lucasfilm, because this show's definitely a mess. They definitely added Mandalorian's episodes into it, and I remember being disappointed with the Robert Rodriguez thing. I was they had Fennec Shand. I was studying the Heroine's Labyrinth at this point, so I was excited about another female character. And this one kind of, and the actress was great, but they didn't do anything with her. There was no real character for her. And I also remember being disappointed that Tamara Morrison came back for this, and it was and he's kind of disavowed the show. I think in later comments that he was a little disappointed.
It sounded like it, yes. Then he thought he talked too much. I had heard that he said that I think I'm talking too much. Can somebody, because this is such a visual character. And, originally in Return of the Jedi, I don't know the name of the actor who played, but I've heard that actor was cast because he was a mime, because he's not going to have anything that's good to say. So he's going to have to carry that character completely visually.
Yeah, you could
so
see
I
that.
believe the actor was like a mime, because so his visual presence is going to have to carry the character. And so I feel like he was channeling that Mortensen you're talking about in this, like, I'm talking too much. Like, I'm a visual character. I'm not supposed to be saying this much.
Right.
Yeah, that was Jeremy Bullock, by the way. Jeremy Bullock, who passed away in 2020.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and Boba Fett was a man of few words, so he wasn't a conversationalist, right? Even when he was talking to Vader, he made his point quickly. He's worth a lot to me. That's it. One line. And that was enough.
And that's what kind of makes him cool and kind of sexy. Like, women told me that they're two sexiest characters, and maybe Retro Nerd Girl, you agree or disagree. Women told me that their two sexiest characters for them in Star Wars were Boba Fett because he was mysterious and he didn't say anything. He just had a swagger. His whole body was swagger, right? Complete fearlessness. And Darth Maul, because he also didn't say anything. He says one line: "We will get our revenge, master." You don't say anything else. You don't say anything else. "We will get our revenge, master." That's all he says in the whole movie, and he's just badass. And they're like, "That's sexy. That's the strong silent type."
Not Max Rebo. No one said he was the sexy. No.
No. There.
Well,
Would
and
you
by
agree,
the way, in
Retro
the new-
Nerd Girl? I mean, there's
Well,
a sexist those guys.
There are two of some of my favorite villains, I would say. Just for those reasons. I do have a different pick for
Oh,
for
who's
the
your pick? I want
sexiest.
to hear your pick. Who's your pick?
Young Anakin Skywalker.
Ah.
Well, young, not as in the little kid, right?
Not that young.
No.
the one from
young.
Revenge.
Only Padme
or-
Amidala was into that.
yeah. Only Padme. But
that's
Anakin Skywalker and I would say young Obi-Wan. So
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but again, these are all things that I did hear that the people inside of Lucasfilm around Favreau were kind of startled at the feedback, right? Because they've been used to getting their asses kissed over Mandalorian, especially
Right.
coming off of the high of the season of, Luke coming back. So they were quite startled and disappointed and sad that people were reacting it. And they began to realize maybe we did screw this up. Maybe we didn't patch this back together after Gina left. And, and the damage of that has, had repercussions throughout Star Wars. I mean, it damaged, and Kathleen Kennedy is laughing because she understood that it would do that. She understood that she cut Favreau in half like Maul, because she's like, he's not going to be able to recover from this.
Yeah, she was winning the chess game.
Right, and it's going to get worse. Well, she's winning the chess game, but in a way that has backfire potential down the road for her.
It's not about money. It's not about
and I have to keep the conversation moving along. And Lance, I know you have some thoughts on this, but the next big event out of Disney Lucasfilm is the launch of one of the most spectacular theme park elements of all time.
Boy, do I have some thoughts on this.
The Galactic Starcruiser, a can't miss Star Wars hotel LARPing experience. It's going to cost $6,000 per head. This thing's going to be a juggernaut. People from around the world are going to come here. They're going to shell out thousands of dollars to do this. They're going to hang out with Rey and Kylo and First Order stormtroopers. It's going to be the best thing ever. The best thing ever. And you get to sleep in one of these rooms. See the fake window with space in it? You get to look out that. So,
I think most of the rooms didn't even have that fake window with the space on.
I've actually seen some worse ones.
On the other side, I think that's a special promotional room. I mean
that one looks reasonable from what I've seen.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of videos of this thing. I'm not talking about the shill videos for the nonsense promotioning opening weekend that was just the whole thing was just a setup with a load of everybody got invited for free to say how amazing it was. Look, I mean, I ran a Star Wars LARP that was in a warehouse where we had a budget of about, I think it was about $400, probably around $500, and we built a set, and we even had a miniature of the Star Wars trench. I think I showed you guys some pictures of that before, and with a computer simulator where the players would go and attack the Death Star in one room. That was towards the end of the day. And then we had a bridge for a spaceship. We had a cantina. We had all this kind of weird alien food being sold and shit. And we had a band. We put this all together in a couple of weeks. And I think we did a better job than the Galactic Starcruiser is what I'm going to say. Because
you know what, Lance, I bet you did.
Well, people actually interacted and had gunfights, and we had stormtroopers breaking in, and the players would defend the ship, and they got to do the sort of cool stuff that the kids were probably hoping. And I understand you're limited to some degree in terms of things like you can't have participants doing stuff that stunt people do. Okay, but you can cheat that. So if you look at the Men in Black ride, which is in, I forget which theme park it's in, Retro or no?
I don't know.
No? Oh, okay.
I don't know.
Where's Lorena when we need her?
I know, that's we need Lorena.
We're going to cover when this shuts down. She'll be here for that.
Yeah, I mean, but anyway, you got the Men in Black ride, and the Men in Black ride is basically a laser tag ride, and you're in a little car, and you've got your laser gun, and you're firing at the aliens. They've all got targets on it. Works exactly the same way as laser tag. Now, there's no reason why you couldn't have set up part of the ship where it's like, for one part of the storyline. I'm just spitballing here as one idea. You get a load of the kids and you say, right, you're going to train to be rebel troops. We're going to get bored. Just in case we get boarded, you're going to train to defend this corridor, and you're going to set up you're going to have part of your set. It's going to be like the corridor in the first Star Wars movie. And then, you'll do one bit with the kids where they're training and they all come running in. They have to run into the corridor and set up their firing positions. And you get somebody to train them to do that a couple of times. And then they say later, okay, if this siren goes off, if you hear this noise, you guys have to come back here with your pistols and you have to take up this position. And at some point during their experience, that happens. And these kids have to go and run and do that. And suddenly at the end of the corridor, the door blows open and you've got a load of stunt guys coming out. And these kids are shooting those stunt guys, and those stunt guys are doing all the big flips and stuff. And this is happening beyond a barrier where the kids, where the public can't get to, but it looks like they can. Again, you cheat all this stuff, right? Now that's probably as close as you could get to having the kids participate in some kind of action sequences, doing something like that, where it's very staged, but it feels like it isn't staged. And it feels like they get to participate in something that's real. And if there'd been something like that in this thing as a kid, that would have driven me nuts. I would have been insanely impressed with that. Even a kid of today would have been insanely impressed. But what you basically got was staged dinner theater. So you're paying $6,000 to admittedly wander around a very impressive looking set in a room that probably feels cool for the first 5 minutes, and then you realize it's quite uncomfortable. And then, your feet stick out the bed and things like the beds are not very big. And then, I've heard mixed things about the food. Some people said the food was amazing. Some people said the food was awful. So I guess that just depends if you like this weird shaped food. But I think at the end of the day, they're just, the interaction stuff that they had, a lot of it was like really lame. Wandering around in the engine rooms to find bits of a puzzle. I mean, you can include all that stuff as well, but the onboard computer system that was part of the ongoing story didn't work properly, and the whole thing was too linear. So if you weren't in the right room when the certain bits of the show took place, you missed that stuff. Tough luck. Whereas I think, sure, some of that stuff had to be like that, but I think there should have been a lot more kind of free roaming stuff going on that could have happened anywhere at any time. They missed they missed the boat on this.
Yeah, in 2021, I actually showed a video of my son. He was a lot younger back then, but we walked into the Disney theme parks, and this actually might have been like 2019. It was right at the end of that. And they had Jacob dress up as a Jedi. This was all for free, by the way. Dress up as a Jedi, gave him a lightsaber. He got to go on stage while the Imperial March was playing, fight a guy that looked like Darth Vader. It was like a legit costume. It didn't look like cosplay. It was a legit costume with the Imperial March. And they even had sound effects when he clashed his lightsaber with him. And then after that, he got to come off stage, and the other kid went on there. Kylo Ren showed up. A third sister showed up. And you had this Jedi. All of this was for free in the theme park. So when I started seeing footage of this in contrast to that, it was significantly downgraded from the free experience that I had with my son, 4 years prior. And I remember when the trailer came out, and it was the singer. There was a singer that came out there. And I remember watching this trailer, and I was like, you know what this reminds me of? Like in the 80s.
Fifth Element?
Well, sort of the Fifth Element.
The captain looked like she was from the Fifth Element, basically.
Yeah. Do you remember like being a kid in the 80s in the lunchroom? There's like the lunch ladies that walk around. I was like, this is what Star Wars would be if the lunch ladies came up with a plan. Like, this is what this is. This isn't Star Wars. This is like people who don't understand Star Wars thinking what they think is cool using Star Wars. It was so bizarre.
Well, that's that's what it is. It's people who don't understand Star Wars were running the joint, with the exception of Jon Favreau, right? And
Correct.
Dave Filoni's like, I just want to keep my job. Dave Filoni understood Star Wars a heck of a lot better than everybody else there, right? But he's like, I just want to keep my job. I just keep my head low, survive all of this, right? I know it's crap. I don't care, right? And so, I mean, that's the situation you're in.
Yeah, my impression of Filoni was, and it started to change it because I was a huge fan of Dave Filoni because he delivered the Clone Wars, which I'm a huge fan of. However, my impression of him in retrospect is that he's a guy that kind of works and plays to the level of his boss. So when Lucas was his boss, I think he played to that level, and he had the capacity of doing some really good stuff. When Kennedy was his boss, he started to play to that level, and he really lost a lot of endearment with the fandom.
Yeah, he's a company man. He doesn't care what you, the fans, think. He wants to keep his job. That's why he's been there for like 15 years plus, and I survived 6 months at Disney before I was fired, right? This guy knows what he's doing. I stood up for my integrity. Guess what? I'm walking out with a box. So he knows how to play that game.
Yeah. Yep. So, I mean, Heath, are you ready to shell out $6,000 to hang out with old lady Greedo?
No, I was not. And this goes back to also what I was saying with the theme park in general, that I should have been the exact person they were marketing to, because I don't have kids personally, but I have nephews who are exactly the age to take to something like this. And my brother and I loved Star Wars, all of this. We should have been as customers, the person who's actually gives the money out, right? So the customers would be the person who has the money. So that should have been me and my brother, who, my brother's 4 years younger than I am. My brother has children. We should have been the exact target market for Galaxy's Edge, and also this. Like, oh my God, you have got to bring the kids there, no matter what it costs, but especially if it costs a reasonable amount. That, like, oh my God, Seth, my brother, this summer we have to take the boys to this, and that was not the reaction that I had.
Right.
Yeah.
No.
Well, and remember, there was this $5,000 drink they were touting. I remember watching a YouTube video, and I felt so bad just vicariously watching. This guy was trying to get excited. He just spent $5,000 on this, so he's got some cash. But you saw this thing come out and steam come out. And whoever his wife or friend is, they're filming him, and he's like, he's like trying to get in, he drinks it, and he's like, this is really great. And I could just see that all this guy was thinking is, I just spent $5,000 on like Kool-Aid, like a glass of Kool-Aid. And I felt so bad. I could see from one dad to another, I was like, you blew it, buddy. You just blew $5,000 for nothing.
I hope he gets to keep the podule thing that the drink came in for spending $5,000 on that. I mean, look,
you know what that would get used for? Like, my wife would put candles in there and put it out on the back porch. That's what it would get used for.
better use of it. This is exactly what's wrong with this experience, right? Because Star Wars was always for everyone, and what you're basically saying by serving a $5,000 drink at this hotel is, this part of Star Wars is actually not for you. And it's been written by self-serving, self-entitled people who are being paid far more than they should actually, because they're the people that think there are other stupid people out there that would pay $5,000 for this drink. Whereas actually what they want is an authentic Star Wars experience. And paying $5,000 for a drink in a Star Wars LARP is not an authentic Star Wars experience. What it is overpriced bullshit. So
right.
I mean, that this drink alone for me sums up everything that's wrong with this experience. This is nonsense.
Well, so here we are. Lucasfilm is it hit the skids on the sequel trilogy. Favreau literally did a 180 and brought it all the way back with The Mandalorian. Really gave the fandom a thrill with the end of season 2. And now we're starting to see Lucasfilm on this losing streak again. It's got Book of Boba Fett was a mess. The Starcruiser came out, and people were just befuddled by this bizarre take on Star Wars that they're asking a lot of money for. And then, so I think this is an extension of the problems. There are 3 major events, and I know, Kamran, you're going to want to talk about some of these. There were 3 major events that take place outside of Lucasfilm that Disney gets involved in, and it's part of this ongoing confrontational version of Disney that we are seeing play out here. So the first one is, while all this is going on and fans are already getting a little disenfranchised, there's the famous "Don't Say Gay" bill in Disney, and Chapek actually had a very strong position on. He's like, what I want to do is not get the company involved in political issues. So he was like, what we're going to do is stay neutral. That was his position. The Chapek initiative was, we're going to be neutral. We're not going to take a position. And I remember that some people applauded this move. And by the way, Disney is still dealing with this today. The idea of being a neutral company rather than one that's politically involved and committed hardcore on one side or the other. And from the ground up, kind of there was a groundswell movement inside Disney, and Chapek kind of changed his mind on this issue. And he kind of came out and he made a public statement. And this started a battle between the Walt Disney World in Orlando, Florida, and Governor Ron DeSantis, who was a conservative Republican governor of Florida. They start battling it out. So now we're getting more conflict out of Disney at this time when Chapek first says, we're not going to be political, and then he got political. So by doing both, he ended up kind of angering both sides. And Chapek began to be viewed a little bit as embattled, I guess you could say, an embattled CEO who has replaced Bob Iger. So does anyone have any comments on this particular issue?
Yeah, I mean, if I may, I'm going to jump into this because
Sure.
I wrote about a lot of this on my Patreon. You know, the thing is this: looking at hindsight, now Disney is actually doing what Chapek said. Now, years later, with everything that's happened, Iger has the cover to actually just implement all of this, right? Right. But someone had to be the first one to say, you know, the emperor's got no clothes. We've got to get onto another track. Someone had to say it. And remember, we're still at the height of, of the Trump frenzy and all that stuff, and in Hollywood. And I'm going to say this, and it'll be controversial, but it's true. The Hollywood has a bunch of mafias, of mafias of people of shared political ideology, shared ethnic values, blah, 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 whatever. And there's a variety of them, right? There's a very large contingent of people that are sympathetic to LGBTQ issues, right? Especially at Disney, right? And to them, this was almost like a religious attack, right? On them, right? All he was saying is, we're going to stay out of it, not our problem, right?
Right.
We're going to keep running Disney the way we run Disney. We're just not going to comment on any of this stuff. And, this isn't our business to get involved in state policies, right? Which is a rational position for a global family entertainment-based company to just stay silent. That's all he's saying. But,
Right.
At this moment, that particular aspect of Hollywood went into overdrive, saying that this is all part of the Trump agenda to erase trans people, to erase gay people, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Even though Trump actually had quite a few these gay members of his in his administration, not really trans people, but gay, it's not clear that there was anti-gay bigotry in Trump's first administration, right? But nonetheless, that's how it was perceived in Hollywood. This was the red line for those people, and they rallied. And I just want to add one thing, Lindell, you said that. But because it's a point of cultural consensus in Hollywood, right? As a result, all the trades attacked Chapek as well. That's why the defensive vulnerability you saw is that the trades are normally controlled by the studios. When the trades start attacking Chapek as being on the wrong side of history, suddenly he's got no allies, because the trades are both the spokespeople to the system and the protectors of the system. So now by doing this, the trades are saying this guy's not one of us. He's not one of us, right? And so now he suddenly goes from being this aggressive new CEO to being completely embattled. It turns out his policy is what Disney would adopt afterwards, but he took the fall for it.
Well, and this was still part of the strong era of cancel culture.
Yes.
We just saw Gina Carano get tossed. So to adopt the ideology of neutrality at this time was viewed as an act of hostility. And so it was treated that way. It was treated as an act of hostility. And but this then embroiled Disney, the entire company, who's they're based in California, but they have huge holdings there. And I used to live in Orlando, Florida. They're based right there. So, they have a huge relationship with the state of Florida. And so this ends up triggering we talked about the culture wars, we talked about the streaming wars, we talked about the Civil War, and now we're getting into outright political warfare between Disney and, by default, Lucasfilm and the state of Florida, where a lot of this is taking place. So the next major event is something that kind of went quietly. This wasn't huge news necessarily to many of us, but on what day was it? It was in April of 2022. Karen McCarthy gets fired from Disney, and she was hired. So in 2020, at this point, 2 years ago in this timeline, they announced the Acolyte. Mm-hmm. She was hired, and I guess she lasted for about 2 weeks, and then they fired her. And at the time, this was not viewed. We didn't know what all that was attached to this, but this ends up being a big deal, and I think it's still going to end up being a bigger deal as time goes by. But at this time, another person is removed. So we saw Gina Carano go. Now we have Karen McCarthy go.
She was the line producer, which is the actual person who is physically responsible for making the show. There's lots of people with producer credits who never read the script. The only thing they did was somebody owes them a favor, or they got the actor attached and they get a producer credit, right? They did something that allowed the show to facilitate move forward. They get producer credit. The line producer is the person who actually has to hands-on hire the crew, create a budget, manage the actual production, right? The real producer of the project, right? So Ms. McCarthy had been offered a chance to go to work on the show called Sugar with Colin Farrell that would go on to be a hit later, right? And I think she was offered a very substantial amount of money to line produce that show, right? And Apple has a lot of money, right? And she turned that down because this is Star Wars. You want to do everyone wants to do Star Wars. And then, a couple of weeks into it, she's just like, from what she claims, was unceremoniously let go in the form of people not responding to her emails anymore. Like, she moved. I mean, I've spoken to her attorney multiple times. Right? There are some people who have actually doubted that I've spoken to an attorney. That became an issue of controversy. People claim that I've posted photos of myself with the attorney in his office on, and people are like, oh, you're a liar, Kamran. It's a delusional thing, right? But I've spoken to her attorney multiple times, right? And so he gave me a lot of insight. And, she had, from what he told me, she had not only turned down the job offer at Apple, she moved to London. She got an apartment in London. She put money down. She justifiably relied on what she thought was a done deal, because the way things work in Hollywood, especially in television, due to the speed of how television moves, is that you don't wait for a physical contract. You have handshake agreements, you have email agreements, and you go to work. I've worked on TV shows where I got my physical contract to sign 6 months after the show was over. Right. Mm-hmm. However, I worked on it the whole season, was paid based on the email representations that were made to the agents. And that was what we followed. The actual contract wasn't literally, I'll be like, the show's been over. And my lawyer's like, you got to sign this thing. I'm like, for what? He said, well, we need it for our records. I was like, all right. So, but that's when you get the contract. Right. And so she got the email. This is your salary. We're good to go. We're starting you on this day. She went with it, as you do in television, and moved to London, only to suddenly have people now responding to her emails. And she's like, well, I'm here. When do you need me at the office? When do you need me to do this stuff? They're like, we'll get back to you. Like, what do you mean we'll get back to you? You hired me. And then just silence, right? And so, and from my own investigation into this and various scoops that I've had on my channel, on my YouTube, on my Patreon channel, basically, as we have now discovered, because Karen McCarthy sued and has now recently, only a few months ago, amended her lawsuit based on what she discovered in discovery, because the lawsuit went as far as the people were deposed. Leslie Headland was deposed. Top level Lucasfilm people were deposed, and documents were released. And based on that, they amended their complaint to actually allege fraud, which is what I've always believed happened there. Right? She was just alleging breach of contract. She was just saying you breached my contract. Now she's saying there was never a contract to be made because Leslie Headland never had a green light. That is she now alleging, which I claimed 2 years ago. Leslie Headland had made this claim. We talked about it last week's episode. Leslie Headland and Kennedy had pre-announced a show that didn't exist, that did not have Bob Chapek's approval. And now she is claiming that in the lawsuit, saying, based on the evidence I've seen, there never was a show. You made me a job offer when you didn't have a show. You had no authority to do that. And you made me lose another job. You made me lose money going to London. So that's fraud. You lied to me that there was a show. There never was a show. The reason they couldn't give her anything is because they were still scrambling. What I think happened here was that was part of Leslie Hendon and Kathleen Kennedy's efforts to try to convince Chapek to give them the money. Because the first thing was what we talked about last week. Kennedy announces a show that Chapek has not approved. Now he's got the political pressure of the trades claiming the show is happening, right? And Hedlund then posting pictures of herself at Galaxy's Edge, right? Pretending it's the set of a show, right? Of a spaceship on a show. It's Galaxy's Edge. And they're doing this PR thing, and Chapek is still resisting them, saying, you're not going to strong arm me into making the show. We're not going to do it, right? So they go higher. They make an offer to Ms. McCarthy as well. Well, you're going to have to give us the money because we got a real line producer who's like worked with major famous actors and stars. You can't disappoint her. And they're like, we're still not giving you the money. And then Hedlund's like, crap, I can't pay this woman. Because she thought she was going to use her as the catalyst to get the thing. And it didn't happen. So that's why she stops responding to emails. That's what happens in LA. Here's a little inside baseball, which I think Lance will confirm, I hope. When people stop responding to your email, something is terribly wrong. That's the sign. When they don't respond, something is terribly wrong and you don't know what it is.
Yeah,
I'll use that as my segue to duck out, if I may. But
would you agree?
A quick underscore to that is when I was getting screwed on my movie, the one I got really screwed on. I think about a year before, when we had a production meeting, I said to my team, "These guys never put anything in an email. We have had one email from these guys since we've been dealing with them, and the totality of the text in that email was, we'll get right back to you." That was it. And I said, when people are not prepared to respond to stuff in writing, like, what are you doing? What's the plan? What's the campaign? You send an email asking very reasonable questions, and not only do you not get a reasonable answer, you don't get any answer. That is always a massive red flag. I've just finished negotiating a contract on something, which fortunately I got what I asked for. And it was a real hard back and forth. And even at the very beginning, before we had the first conversation, I said, I've got a load of questions I want answered. And they said, let's jump on a call. And I said, no, let's not jump on a call. Answer the questions, and then I'll have the call with you. And that went on for about a week until I got a response, with them constantly trying to get me on a call. So, the reason that once email chains are not happening because they are evidence, just ask Gina Carano.
Yep.
That something is rotten in Denmark, and it's great to hear.
Something's not kosher when they're not responding. Even the response can be, "I'm sorry, we're not doing the project." But when they're not responding, there's a game being played.
That's a good time to jump ship right there, which is what I'm going to have to do now, because it's 20 past 2 and I'm poorly.
You got to feel better.
Lance, take care of yourself. Thanks for swinging in and talking some Star Wars and some Lucasfilm with us.
Great having you, Lance.
Next week.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it. Retro, I'll be popping in your stream as usual when I come back from raving.
Sure.
So, my usual back from raving comments. But yeah, thanks, guys. And I think you're doing one more of these. Is that right, next week?
Yes. Yep. Well, there's a lot. Yeah, there's so much.
Okay, so we're doing 20 more of these. So
we're doing 20 more. Yes,
we're doing 2 more seasons. 2 more seasons of this. I'll be on as many as I can, because I've find it fascinating, and it's great taking part. So.
Well, it's good to try to go back and make sense of it all. And I think we have enough information now where we can look back and string together a clear picture of what happened.
Oh, I forgot to say earlier, if people want to find me, my channel's called The Outcast Creative. We had a fantastic interview early tonight that was unscheduled. A filmmaker friend of mine, he wrote an open letter criticizing the Australian film industry. That letter has gone viral in Australia and has now gone viral internationally. Just Google it, Matthew Holmes filmmaker letter, it will come up. And we got Matt on the channel, and we had this great debate about the way films are being made, how they're being financed, how there's no financial real kind of arms for independent filmmakers to access, and all of the problems that come with that. And it's not irrelevant to the discussion you're having tonight, and it's a really, really interesting 2-hour stream. I even invited people from the chat to come onto the stream because we had loads of independent filmmakers popping up in the stream.
Wow.
So yeah, so we're going to be doing another one of those, and we're going to take that conversation a bit further. But I think it's the start of a bit of a movement. So again, not irrelevant to this topic tonight. Anyway, on that bombshell, I'll duck out, and I'll see you all again soon.
All right, Lance. Thanks a lot. Take care, buddy.
Take care. Bye.
Feel better.
Bye-bye.
So I just wanted to say, too, the reason we're bringing up some of these things is at the time, these seemed like small headlines to a lot of us. You know, we were focused on maybe just the shows, and that, you know, you would hear this person was let go or that person was let go, and they kind of flew under the radar. But now that we're zooming in and we're starting, and, you know, it's 2025, we can look back. We're like, oh, these are now bits of evidence of major structural problems that not only affect Disney, they're affecting Lucasfilm, they're affecting the entire corporate culture, and they affect Star Wars. So, you know, if you cared about these shows, if you cared about what was happening to these shows, well, these are some of the chess pieces in the background that are major, that are very important to what's going on and why they're getting it wrong. So anyway, she was let go, and I won't spend too much time on this, but surprisingly, there was another major event that happened immediately after this, right after she was let go. So this is now April 22nd. DeSantis revokes the special district under Disney. This is going to cost them billions over the next several years. This was a major thing. They were basically living rent-free / tax-free in Florida. They didn't have to do anything. They had their special district, which was controlled, from my understanding, by either people extremely favorable to Disney or by almost indistinguishable from an employee of Disney, and giving themselves very favorable deals. And now this has been revoked, and this is going to throw Disney into further chaos. Why does this matter? This massive faucet of funding that seemed to be endless funding for these shows and these programs, and seemingly not even concerned whether or not they're profitable. Well, now the financial centers are starting to get hit. So you're going to start to see some effort to scale back at some point with the content coming out. You know, there seemed to be no consequence to making bad shows and bad movies. There seemed to be no consequence. So remember that we started with, we had all of those shows. We had The Mandalorian come out. We now had Book of Boba Fett come out. And we're about to get our next one.
There's too many of them.
Exactly. So the next show to come out, by the way, is one that a lot of people were excited about. I was tacitly intrigued by it. What I didn't like about it was she said that she made a big announcement, and she said Darth Vader and Kenobi, the rematch of the century. And I was like, rematch of the century? Rematch? I couldn't quite square that one.
No, but she doesn't understand time frames. I mean, I honestly don't think Kathleen Kennedy's ever actually watched any of these movies. She doesn't know where any of this fits. I mean, I really don't think she's watched these movies. I know for a fact that Leslie Headland hasn't watched the movies, because when Leslie Headland is asked, "What's your favorite Star Wars movie?" she said, "Oh, all of them." That's not the right answer. You asked me, I will tell you Return of the Jedi, not Empire Strikes Back. Return of the Jedi, because that's the one I saw in the theater. That's the first one I saw in the theater. That has the most childhood emotional impact on me. Oh. Anyone who's a Star Wars fan can answer that question. What's your favorite Star Wars movie? If you say all of them, you've seen none of them. And I'm pretty sure Kathy hasn't either.
I mean, if you're like Attack of the Clones is also my favorite, I'm side-eyeing you. Okay.
But you can answer the question, right? It's not, you have an immediate answer to that.
Yeah.
All of them is not the answer.
So, Retro, I know you were probably more bullish on this than now. Let me just say that I'll say this, and then I'll segue over to you, and I'll be real brief. I gave this show a legitimate chance. Why? It's Ewan McGregor. Yeah. So that counts to me as a Star Wars fan. Even though I was a little down on the prequels, I still like Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan Kenobi. I like him. He's a great actor. He did a great job reprising or playing that role. So he's coming back. There's news that Hayden Christensen's coming back. So, you know, we're starting to, the prequels, the actors, they're going to resurrect some of this in the show. I didn't care so much about the Darth Vader thing, but I'm slightly intrigued. I cleared my head of all the negativity around the build up to the show. And I'm like, I'm going to watch it. And I'll even say that I actually liked the first episode. I liked the first episode. I even liked the trailer. The trailer was very promising, by the way. I remember I got emotional at this scene in the trailer. They show Obi-Wan Kenobi look with binoculars, and there's young Luke, just like he was, just like the homestead in Star Wars: A New Hope. But he's playing with his T-16, and he's being an imaginative young boy, and Obi-Wan's watching him from afar. And I was like, that's exactly what this should look like. Obi-Wan overlooking the boy, Luke Skywalker, the offspring of Anakin Skywalker. So this suggested that they understood what the show would be about. It's going to be about Obi-Wan and Luke. Somehow there's going to be an adventure here. But I was intrigued, and I did like the first episode. But Retro, I think I remember watching one of your videos where you were kind of fighting back against some of the hatred of the show out there, and you were defending it on some levels, which is cool.
I will say this about this. I'll give you a little backstory. I was on silent protest for a long time of Disney stuff, and not, silent protest really means I didn't tell anybody not to see anything. I didn't announce it to anybody, but it just wasn't. I wasn't actually going to consume any of the stuff until like maybe retroactively. So I actually decided, okay, Obi-Wan, we can come back for Obi-Wan, okay? Because he was like amazing in the prequels. I loved him in the prequels, and of course loved him in A New Hope. And so I wanted to see more of this character, and especially after Order 66, what happened to him? What did he experience? And my intrigue led me to the show. I watched the show with a lot of other people. There's even episodes of me watching it with other people online, and also giving commentary. There were distinctive things that got me excited about the Star Wars moving forward. Possibilities I could see in the show that was presented. There were some certain things I had never seen before, or that I really enjoyed, like seeing Anakin come back, seeing Vader interact with people. So I loved all that stuff, but it unfortunately had, of course, a writing problem, and it did not stay focused on Obi-Wan. It seemed to be scattered all over the place, and we can say that Riva was a character a lot of people didn't understand. I had problems with her as well. I remembered seeing the character and actually feeling something like, oh my God, this is so great. We've got the Inquisitors, and this is going to be awesome. Especially the first couple episodes, I was like, this is going to be so cool. But then it just dragged on with this character that just didn't seem to make sense in the whole story. And then we've got baby Leia, and I was like, oh my God, that is so cute, baby Leia. But then she was just sort of not worked into the story properly. There were so many situations that you're like, okay, that would never happen. Like, what is she doing here? And even though she was so cute, and I think that there could have been a movie, like I said, a special movie. You shouldn't always think of everything as a series, because maybe there's just not enough story to make a series of this stuff. And that's another thing I found with this series, was that it was something that could have been just a movie and not a series. It would have really worked well as a movie. And yeah, and so I was back to Star Wars again. So this is the series that got me excited about Star Wars again, because of the potential.
So you dropped your boycott.
Yeah, and then I watched The Mandalorian seasons 1 and 2. I went back for everything. I was like, oh, okay, wow. But there are just certain things that you like some things, and then there's some things that don't work. So when in my video that I did wasn't really mostly defending it, but it was kind of pointing out all the things I absolutely loved about it, which was all the nerdy stuff you've always wanted to see. I was definitely against all the stuff that didn't work, and also all the questions that were left unanswered that they left on the table for this movie, for this series, and which they could have easily answered. But again, the writing just seemed to be focused in the wrong area and not on Obi-Wan.
Well, and this had in the scope of like what Lucasfilm is spending money on. This show got a pretty low budget. I think it was made for $90 million. If you compare that to Andor, $250 million, I mean, it's no low contending there. I mean, it's not even close. And, this show, and Cameron, correct me if I'm wrong, but like Boba Fett was supposed to be a Jon Favreau production that seemed to have, that got kind of torpedoed.
Yeah,
this
that
had
was the
some of the
original plan,
fingerprints
yeah.
of Kennedy on it. Is that right?
Yeah, it was the original plan was it was going to be a Favreau thing, and then after Carano was ousted and Favreau got pulled onto this Chapek conciliary role, that thing just went to hell, and it went to hell because Kennedy said, "All right, I'm going to come in here and I'll guide this, because I'm the boss, and the other fake boss is gone right now."
Yeah. So, I mean, to me, it started okay. It had the fingerprints of Kennedy. The idea that Obi-Wan's watching over Luke, which is how it was sold to us in the trailer. And then he decides he's going to leave Tatooine and actually go on an adventure with, a 7 or 8 year old Princess Leia. I'm a parent, and, it's really hard to imagine your parents like, I don't know. It's hard to imagine that it seems like more like a child abduction. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was really bizarre to see her leave her parents and her homeworld to go on an adventure. And it doesn't make sense with the canon. She's like, years ago, you fought with my father in the Clone Wars, as if she needed that pretense. She should have said, remember that wild
I
night,
know.
days back in, 20 years ago. None of that. So this was canon breaking. And I remember watching all these videos come out to just finger wag the fans and say, this is not canon breaking. You're wrong. And I'm like, well, I'm not wrong. This is canon breaking. It makes the dialogue in A New Hope not make sense. That makes so much not make sense. And Retro, I think you're right. The actress was adorable as Princess Leia. They could have done something with her in a different show.
Yes.
But not this one. This one, it doesn't make sense.
So I'm going to come in now. I'm going to pipe in with a contrarian perspective.
Okay.
I get all the critiques. I especially get Retro Nerds critiques. They're all fair critiques. I still like the show. I like the show. I enjoyed the show. And I'll tell you why. Because when you work in television, as I have now for 24 goddamn years, right? You see how this sausage gets made. You see how this hot dog gets made. And you see all the brilliant stuff that you try to do that's sabotaged by all the morons in the process, right? On a normal studio. Not Lucasfilm made a normal studio. Lucasfilm was a pathologically dysfunctional studio, but just a normal dysfunctional studio like everybody else, right? You'd have to deal with moron executives. You have to deal with some producer, some actor who insists on doing it this way, and he's got the power to push for it. Every single day is a constant battle of watching your brilliant work be brought down to garbage, and then you bring it up to a little bit above mediocre, right? And you do that every day. So maybe I give these things leeway. Boba Fett was just all over the place. I was honest about it. It didn't work because it was all over the place. It was disjointed. This wasn't disjointed. This had a storyline. It may not be the storyline some people wanted, right? But it was the storyline, and and I liked it. I enjoyed it. I didn't have the problems that the fandom did. I understand the arguments of breaking canon. I just enjoyed the show. I didn't see it as breaking canon because when you're sending a quick hologram or you're being hunted by stormtroopers, you don't say, remember our long history? She hasn't seen this guy in a decade, right? It's literally like, here I am and I'm an adult. I'm a senator. You've been a hero of my family a long time. Like, just here, take care of this droid. I got to get out of here. And she gets shot a second later anyway, right? So I don't really care about that. The battles with Vader, I loved the sequence of the battles with Vader. I loved how, when you see Vader on the planet, and I watched I read an interview, I think it was Vanity Fair, of the showrunner, and it was exactly what I felt. Because watching when Vader's trying to lure out Obi-Wan by just killing people randomly, children. He just force choking everybody in the village just to push Obi-Wan, who's supposed to be a hero, to come out and rescue them. And Obi-Wan is just like, if I do that, I'm going to expose Leia. So he's letting all these people die, and Vader's just killing them. It was horrific, and it was scary. It was like watching Michael Myers in Halloween, just plowing people, slowly walking through the village, just killing people without any emotion. And and later the showrunner said that he modeled that whole sequence on Halloween, on Michael Myers. So I saw what he did there. He said that. I did it on purpose. And then I love the final battle with Vader and the confrontation when Vader's mask is cut in half and Obi-Wan finally has to face what he did to Anakin, and I thought the acting, both of their acting was superb in that. I thought Hayden Christensen, he does it brilliantly. He plays both Anakin and Vader in that. You see his face changing, when he's like, first he's like Obi-Wan, and you see Anakin, who's like finally looking at his mentor again after all these years through his own eyes, right? And then he's like, then Vader has to take over and rationalize everything and said, you didn't kill Anakin, I did, right? Which sets up how Obi-Wan can rationalize himself lying to Luke. Because he himself said, I've killed him. He's dead, right? I killed him. Right, he took ownership of it, and Hayden's acting in that was incredible. How he changed schizophrenically into another person in one shot, and then Obi-Wan, and then Obi-Wan, his crying tears. I'm sorry, Anakin. I mean, I was crying in that scene. So whatever flaws, and you can nitpick and say you're right in this, and maybe going off with a kid. I don't know what else story if they come to me, that's a story I would have pitched. Because I don't know, unless the whole sequence, the whole show is going to take place on Tatooine. I don't know how to preserve protecting Luke without Luke finding out anything, which I thought they did a pretty good job at. Personally, I thought they did a really good job of keeping Luke in the dark as to what's really happening around him, so that the truth is not uncovered until A New Hope. So I will give it leeway for the flaws, and the flaws that you've all said, I can see them. But I enjoyed the show, and I was really disappointed how negatively the fan reacted. At least I think everyone on this panel is coming from an intelligent, well thought out place. If they were disappointed with it, I wasn't disappointed with it. Well, I could see the character. And
I can give you that perspective. I mean, I can come in with a counter perspective. Because
I know you. That's what everyone's been doing. That's why I'm the counter. Everyone's been doing that.
That's fine. I can because I was not subscribed to Disney when the Book of Boba Fett came out, and then I was watching everybody on YouTube being like, it's up, it's down, it's this gigantic roller coaster, it's whatever, and we're approaching the final episode, and I was like, my God, if I'm going to watch this, I got to subscribe, and I got to like binge watch this. So I had resubscribed to Disney Plus in order to binge watch Book of Boba Fett like before its final episode, because I wanted to know what was going on before all of the YouTube. So before all the YouTube commentary came out, I was like, oh my God, I got to watch it. So I was still subscribed to Disney Plus after Book of Boba Fett, even though I thought that was a disaster. And I was like, now here we go to Obi-Wan, and here we go. Again, I thought the same kind of thing, that this is a situation where we're delving into a character that has some mystery, and we're about to try to expose this mystery. And it went very badly with Book of Boba Fett. It might go very badly with Obi-Wan Kenobi. When we got to the episode where Obi-Wan turns to Princess Leia and says, like, run down this hallway and connect with your ship pilot. I remember thinking, she doesn't even know what that ship pilot looks like. Like, if you were interested in protecting this girl, you would never hey, run down this dangerous hallway and just get on the ship with the pilot. I was like, she doesn't even know what that person looks like. I was like, that's a contrivance to have her get on the ship with the wrong person. I was like, that's moronic. Obi-Wan Kenobi would never do that. And I instantly unsubscribed from Disney Plus. I didn't even watch the rest of the show. I was like, that is such a stupid thing. When you were talking about, yes, there was Darth Vader coming around killing people. And what is Obi-Wan Kenobi's response? Something absolutely moronic toward Leia. I was like, I'm done. That's it. I stopped watching instantly.
You guys make being a TV writer so hard. You're the nightmare.
I know. That's
you go through all this garbage, and then we're like, okay, we're gonna put this together, and we're always saying, I want to say this. We're always going, okay, there's this thing we haven't been able to cover. the script is due this afternoon after all the garbage we've been through to get it to where it is, and this thing, and what about that? And we're like, the only one who's gonna, and literally we say this is the standard line, or the only one who gonna notice that is the asshole. It's like we can't.
There I am.
We can't asshole proof the script.
Like,
that's a standard thing. There's no way to asshole proof this script in the time frame that we've got left to get this into production. And there's nothing we can do about the assholes. And there you are.
Right.
You're literally the visual
here.
representation of what we do in a writer's room going, we don't have any time left. We know the holes better than you do, buddy. We're writing it. And we're just writing it.
Let me say this.
Still went through, and so I canceled. So there you go. So
I'll say this.
The asshole
make the assholes happy when the writers are right.
When that's in the show, we cancel. That was dumb.
I want all of you to spend 6 months in a writer's room. It's like being in a war zone. You have no idea. It's just like, the people protesting, like America, the soldiers, whatever. You go sit in a foxhole and come back to me, right?
Well, there is good writing.
I mean, that's fine,
There's
but I'm just saying when you put that on screen, what?
See, I'll say this,
and it's fine because if it's half a percentage assholes like me, then you can deal with the loss of revenue. Like, that's fine. I completely understand that half of the percentage,
but I would say this,
people watching are like me, who's like, I'm done with this. What is that going on? And if 99.5% are still like, I'll watch it, you get paid money. I got it. I got it. I represent the 0.5% that's like, that was awful, I'm done.
No, I think it's a higher percentage than that. I mean, but I'll say this. This show did do better than Book of Boba Fett. There are fans of it. Retro and Kamran seem to be a little bit more predisposed to liking it. I think myself and Heath are a little bit more predisposed to not liking it. For me, the issue, it's easy to nitpick this show. There's a lot of things with it. It's easy. You could pick it apart for sure. There were things that drove me nuts in terms of just spatial awareness. This scene here drove me nuts, seeing a snowspeeder behave like this. But ultimately, for me, the illusion was broken. I did not feel like I was watching Star Wars as sincerely as when I watch like anything else. So for me, once the illusion was broken, I just couldn't get invested in the images on the screen. I would say the actors mostly saved this for me. I still enjoyed seeing Ewan McGregor come back to life as Obi-Wan Kenobi and Hayden Christensen. Those were thrilling for me in particular. And I thought this was actually wasted, but it was still cool to see for a second. Don't forget, Qui-Gon Jinn comes back in this show, reprised by Liam Neeson, who said he would never be brought back into Star Wars, and he came back for this show. So those were thrills. I thought most of it was wasted, in my opinion. I didn't think the show pulled it off. Some of it was budgetary. Some of the scenes were cheap. Some of the sets looked cheap, and it showed. But ultimately, I think it was a mixed bag, Obi-Wan Kenobi. I don't think it was as bad as Book of Boba Fett. But ultimately, I would say it's a mixed bag. I think this panel is a small sample of about how probably it went in the public. Half liked it,
I think
roughly, so. And half didn't. So, but this was a big one. I think this did turn some people off in a big way. And I think the people who were turned off by this didn't show up at all. Some people like Heath, sounds like you unsubscribed. No one showed up for the next show.
Immediately halfway through this series. Absolutely. I was done.
Well, I watched all of it. I watched the episode with Darth Vader twice just to see if I was missing something. And my heart just wasn't in it. I could not connect to the show. And I have never gone back to it since. I've never had a desire to rewatch it since. And I kind of gave up on Star Wars, to be honest, at that point as well. I didn't unsubscribe or anything. I have kids, so Disney Plus, I'm going to stay subscribed to it. But a large part of the audience disappeared for their next show. And what is funny, what's amazing is that this show had no supporters, if I remember right. Like, very few people. So, like, this is a side character from Rogue One. So this show had the lowest fan enthusiasm, and yet it would actually go on to become one of the best shows that Lucasfilm produced in the Star Wars era. It took me a long time to go back and watch Andor, but I started hearing a lot of people saying good stuff about it. So I was like, I'm going to check it out. Let me tell you, it is the flaws are this. And like Kamran said with Obi-Wan, the flaws are there, but they didn't bother me. It wasn't true with me with Obi-Wan, but it was true with me in Andor. There's very few like monsters and aliens, like and droids, like you. It's a lot of humanoids, so it's really human driven. It is more of a political intrigue story, and yet it's very tightly written. The budget is there for this. They gave this one the budget, and there were some scenes that blew me away. And there's one episode in particular that I got emotional watching, which I couldn't believe. Cameron, did you watch Andor?
Yeah, I liked Andor a lot.
Well,
yeah. What about you, Heath?
No, I am the quintessential person here who did not return because I resubscribed for Book of Boba Fett, thought that was stupid. In the middle of Obi-Wan Kenobi, turned it off. Now you guys are telling me that Andor is really good, and that's on my list to go back and watch. So I believe you guys that Andor is really good, but I am the quintessential person here that, okay, here's the problem. If you give me Book of Boba Fett and then you give me Obi-Wan Kenobi and you have a reason to turn it off in the middle of the series, even if you turn around and give something that's really good with Andor, we're not there for it. And this is the problem that I'm saying. That if you're going to do that's why I'm saying it's not enough to go around to just all of a sudden give an amazing show, because by your accounts, and I believe all of you, Andor is amazing, but I had unsubscribed after being upset with Book of Boba Fett and halfway through Obi-Wan. So I didn't bother to come around for Andor. I will, because you guys tell me. I'm going to go back and I'm going to watch it. I absolutely will. But I'm just
do you
saying
like political thrillers? Do you like political thrillers?
Yeah.
It's a political thriller.
Okay. I mean, I believe you guys. I mean, I completely believe you guys. I want to go and watch the show, but I'm just saying that if you have done something, it's not good. It's not actually enough to just go and make a great show if you have driven away people from because of the previous shows. And I'm that. I was driven away because of the previous shows, so I didn't watch something that was amazing. I'm going to go back and I'm going to watch it because you guys tell me that. But if you're trying to bring Star Wars back, you're trying to do something, you can't just make an amazing show. You have to also communicate that this is amazing and why it's different and why you've got to come back. I had no reason to come back for Andor after I had unsubscribed from Obi-Wan. That's what I'm saying.
Well, and I'll say this. I think the same pattern will repeat a couple years later with Skeleton Crew, where the Acolyte comes out, turns so many people off that here comes Skeleton Crew, which is a great show. And nobody showed up for it, And by the way, I'm just going to say this for anyone listening who's curious about where I'm like, I will watch everything pretty much that they put out with Star Wars. And I know there's some people that it's going to anger some people that I don't protest enough. I love Star Wars. I will watch Star Wars. Now, I didn't watch all the Visions and, Resistance and some of the more obscure ones, but I will watch these shows. It might take me a while to get there, but I will watch them. I will give them a chance, whether I like them or not. And, my fingers are always crossed, right? I'm just hoping, please, just give me something that I'm going to like. I was very pleased to enjoy the characters in Andor, the basic. People complain about the pacing and all that. Look, it's a different type of Star Wars. Like Cameron with Obi-Wan, like part of me is like wanting to defend some of these things that other people are really upset about. It's like, well, I don't care about the pacing because this isn't meant to be a pure action show, right? This isn't Jedis with lightsabers.
It's a cerebral show, which we haven't had before. It's a cerebral show.
Great word. That's a great word for it. It's a cerebral show. There's a lot of chess pieces, and Andor, Andor interested me in Rogue One for one scene, a couple scenes, but one in particular, his intro, where he shoots one of the rebels because the guy gets injured and he shoots him. And then later on, he's trying to post up Jyn Erso. He goes like, you don't know what it is to be a real rebel. Now it's real for you. And he's like posting her up and he's like, you don't know what I've done for the rebellion. And I'm like, ooh, I know what he's done for the rebellion. It's some bad stuff, right? So he is an intriguing character. And when this came out, suddenly his stock is kind of going up for me. And the other character in the show that I really appreciated was Mon Mothma.
Oh, no, the actress was great.
Yeah, she was
superb.
Great. Yeah. She, right out of Return of the Jedi, she had that chilling, solemn presence in Return of the Jedi. They're all getting together. We're going to attack the Death Star. But this isn't the heroic, exciting attack we remember from A New Hope. She's like, guys, this is some serious stuff. Many Bothans died to just get us here. Like she really brings the enthusiasm down because she's so sober about how terrible this is and how this has a low percentage. So she is now we're seeing her when she's in the trenches, still hidden amongst the Galactic Empire's government. She's a member of the government, and the rebellion is brewing around her. And she's kind of very subtly moving pieces. I really appreciated seeing more of Mon Mothma in Andor. I think she's a great character. And let me just say this little thing. I can't wait to see Andor Part 2. I can't wait. So, she's going to be back. So, in my opinion, a lot of good things came out of Andor. But the phrase you'll hear is it's the greatest show that nobody watched. People will go back to watch Andor after season 2, I think. I think you're going to see a good showing for Andor season 2 based on word of mouth. And I think that'll invite people to go back and rewatch season 1.
That's if they land the plane. I hope they do.
What?
That's if they land the plane.
If they land the plane. I think they will.
It looks like they will, but I'm not sure. I'm not confident in Star Wars anymore.
Well, I know.
Go ahead, Keith. Sorry.
Oh, I'm saying that's why I represent that element. Andor could be really good, but it doesn't matter if you have alienated the audience before. So you guys are telling me it's really good. We go back. I hope that's the case, and people pick up Andor. But it's what I'm trying to express here is that there's a systematic nature that if you give people things they don't like, it doesn't matter if you follow that up with something that's good if you haven't communicated that well. And there was no reason for me to go back. Oh my God, Andor! I have to resubscribe. There was no reason for me to do that.
Right. Well, and I understand that. I understand fan dissatisfaction, and I understand why people wouldn't want to watch. I understand. I don't know any other franchise that it's like, well, give me another chance. Give me another chance. Give me another chance. Well, I guess there are other franchises like that. I shouldn't say I don't know any other franchises, but it seems like Star Wars is put out a lot of
Star
material.
Wars is very much like that.
Right. So I will just say this briefly. There is a couple episodes with Andy Serkis, who I'm a big fan of Andy Serkis and his work as an actor. I didn't know he was even in the show when I was watching it, and suddenly he pops up. I was like, oh, Andy Serkis is in Andor? His episodes are some of the best, and there's one in particular that is absolutely stunning. Heath, like you, my dad, who's a huge Star Wars fan, he's like, I don't even want to hear about Star Wars. I told him, I was like, I'm going to tell you what happens in this one episode, and he listened, and I told him, he's like, huh. Wow, because it's good storytelling. So Andor comes out. The audience was cut in half. No one really saw it, but the people who did see it have said really good things about it. And
I'll say one thing. One thing about Andor. It does take 3 episodes to get really good. The first 3 episodes are sluggish, a little bit sluggish. After that, it's amazing. Slow. It's amazing after that, but it does start slow. And so some people saw the first 3 episodes and they were also out because they were like, when is this leading to something? So that's another thing that happened with this show.
Well, and then, so Andor comes out, and then and I only want to spend like a minute on this, but or two, but another show comes out immediately after this. This is really a Dave Filoni pet project. There was like no advertising for it. There was nothing. It's really done in the style of the Clone Wars and the Bad Batch. It just showed up on Disney Plus one day. I liked it. This is really good, by the way.
It's really good. Yes, it's really good.
Yeah. Did you want to say anything else about that, Retro?
No. I think animation has a way with these kinds of stories, and it's not too long. They were really short stories. It was 2 different stories about the Jedi, or Jedi in conflict, and it was just wonderfully told.
Young Count Dooku is in this.
Yeah, very snappy, and that's what a lot of these series are not. They are taken up with a lot of time to make all these episodes, and I'm thinking these snappier little stories are a lot better to tell as far as.
So while this glut of content is spilling out, some good, some bad, there's a major event, and I didn't think much of the event, but Kamran kind of covered it.
Kamran knows all about this.
Yep. Yeah. So it's November 10th, 2022, and this breaking news hits that there's an FTX scandal that breaks out. And to me, I was just like, a white collar scandal. It must be pretty big. It's like a Ponzi scheme. But I didn't realize that this might have some inroads into Disney, ergo Lucasfilm, and may even explain why they're willing, where they're coming up with all this money to fund all this stuff, and why they don't care whether it's profitable or not. But Cameron, do you want to explain what? Because something happens within 10 days of this, which I'll get into in 1 second. But do you want to explain what you think the FTX scandal is and how it might pertain to Disney?
So if people remember, FTX was a cryptocurrency that was being pushed a lot in the media, and then suddenly overnight it collapsed, and there was a realization that the entire process, everything involved in it, was a fraud, right? And so people lost millions of dollars, and it just, the whole thing just came shuttering down. And there were a few things that were interesting about it, is that the founder of this FTX, this character who has now been sentenced to prison, right? He was something, for whatever reason, there's a lot of these crypto weirdos out there, right? And a lot of them are very shady. This guy, right? Sam Bankman-Fried. And guy, for reasons that I have strong theories about, was suddenly being touted at the highest levels of the Democratic Party. You saw this guy everywhere, right? He was suddenly being, boosted as like a great Democratic supporter, and you had news articles how he was giving all of his wealth away to charity and progressive causes and things, and so there was this weird thing where this company was somehow connected to the Democratic Party, and then it just collapsed overnight as people realized there was nothing there, that literally they didn't even have the money to back this thing. So then 10 days later, a certain event happens that
Execute Order 66.
Yeah. And this was the event that was shocking, that I didn't see coming, and I saw no signs of it. And that made me go, because the question I always have when anything happens in Hollywood, especially shocking things, is timing. Why now? And when this event happened, which we're looking at, Bob Chapek was fired unceremoniously, surprisingly, over the weekend. The Disney CEO, he was basically going to an Elton John concert where he was pulled off stage and told, "You're no longer the boss, go home," right? And that was on Sunday. And on Monday morning, Bob Iger is back. This was earth-shattering stuff. This isn't normal.
Unbelievable.
And it's still never been rationally explained. There's been many articles that have attempted to explain it in the Wall Street Journal. None of them actually make any sense. They don't add up. The stories don't add up. The timelines don't add up. To this day, it remains an improbable thing where there's so many stories made up to try to explain it, right? And the only thing I could look at is, well, what just happened? The only major news event that I saw was the FTX implosion, which was 10 days before. It was literally like on a Wednesday. And then the Sunday of 10 days later, Bob Chapek is out. And I thought to myself, that's the only major event, because this is so irrational, because Bob Chapek had secured an extended contract just a few months before and had fired a rival who was trying to take his job, right? He looked invincible. He looked like he was locked in. And then out of nowhere, he's let go. And I couldn't see any specific event that would link to that, except this big event in the news. And then I theorized that maybe Disney was trying, because we know it's publicly known that Disney's been accused by its former accounting people who've sued the company, who've left, have claimed that there are billion-dollar holes in Disney's accounting that are being made up with fraudulent accounting systems, that the company's in the hole for billions of dollars and is pretending it isn't, but it has to keep covering it somehow. So the thought came to me, what if, and I'll just say this, and I know you want to answer it, because what if, speculation, still speculation.
Right.
What if Disney had decided to try to plug the hole by investing $1 billion into FTX, and it was a Ponzi scheme. The idea is we buy FTX at $1 billion, it triples, quadruples, right, in a few months, and then we cash out, and now we've got $4 billion that we cover the black hole with, and it all works out fine, and we can pretend, and we can keep people's paychecks coming without anyone noticing anything happen, right? And if this collapsed, my instinct would be that, because what was happening was everyone in town was saying, do our companies have FTX exposure? So let's say in my speculative situation, Disney had some FTX investment, which I think there were announcements that it was getting involved in cryptocurrency a few months before. That's what was announced publicly. And so what if I were Bob Chapek, I would say, like all the CEOs were saying at the time, to the CFO, can you get me a report as to what our exposure to this is? Just let me know what it is. And if this was fraudulent behavior, then that would implicate people in criminal activity and hiding stuff from the SEC and all that stuff. If the CEO is demanding the report, and let's say he didn't know what was done, then what you have to do is you have to get rid of him. You can't let him see the report because he would be obligated to go to the SEC and have all these people arrested, like members of the board, right? I mean, it sounds such like an extreme thing, but what happened here is so extreme. So suddenly,
but it also explains
he's out, and then Iger's back. And the last thing I just want to say, and then the last thing is to add to it, and I'm going to shut up after this, which is, so this is all wonderful speculation, except there was one slip up that set off my spidey senses. There was a slip up where they were talking about FTX, and then
on a news station,
and then one of these big commentators were like, there's a lot of very prominent people. You can't fault the people that fell for the FTX scam. There are a lot of very prominent backers of FTX, like Iger, and then they cut him immediately, and the anchor stopped talking and changed the topic. I was like, it could be some other Iger. There's only one Iger you're talking about on a finance show. There's only one Iger you're talking about. So if Bob Iger was outed as having been a major backer of FTX, suddenly, and he's the one coming in because he's the only one that can look at that report of fraud because he's the one that authorized it, that suddenly made sense to me. Everything came in like Chinese puzzle just coming together then.
Well, and it started to make sense to me too, because I could not understand, and this would apply to other companies too, but I follow entertainment more than anything else. Why would Disney and Lucasfilm and these people spend so much money, not worry about returns? They're not thinking in terms of consequences, and that always bothers me, because this sort of behavior shouldn't be able to sustain itself. It should be it's the kind of thing that you run into a wall quickly, self-correct. But this wasn't, the self-correcting mechanism wasn't kicking in. And so not only did Chapek leave, and he was trying to course correct, it seemed. There was no real buildup to this Bob Iger return. It wasn't like, there's speculation, there's talk, and
Iger. 24 hours later. Because if the financial report hits the desk on Monday, Bob Iger's on the desk on Monday to make sure that report is quashed, right? So I have to step away for a minute. I want to return to this. I'll be back in a minute. Keep talking about it.
So it did seem bizarre that Disney, while it's in the middle of this course correction, while it's trying to avoid politics and all this stuff, suddenly Bob Iger, the blast from the past, who he decided to step away right before COVID, is now forcing his way back into the company. It was bizarre. It doesn't happen. This doesn't happen in other companies. You just don't see this sort of sudden return of a CEO. So it certainly seemed like something big must have happened for him to want to come back, and to oust the other guy so quickly and so kind of unceremoniously. So I always thought this was a big deal, because this is more evidence of what started as, to me, I look at it like this. It started with a battle between Lucasfilm and the fans. Then it was a battle between Kennedy and Favreau behind the scenes. Then it was this larger battle with the fans and Kennedy and Lucasfilm executives against people. Now you've got these large scale issues between the governor of Florida. You've got political issues coming in. You've got people getting fired strangely who are attached to shows. And now you've got the CEO coming back. So it definitely seems like there's something bizarre going on with Disney and, by default with Lucasfilm. Heath, do you have any thoughts on this, or was this on your radar?
Well, it was on my radar, but I don't understand all of it. So there are other people who understand more. I understand, I remember all of the pro Bob Chapek material, that, oh my God, he's coming back and he is going to change a bunch of stuff that was. And then I remember, whether this is right or wrong, I don't know, but that when Bob Iger returned, that a lot of the things that I thought that Bob Iger had done with Disney that was wrong was blamed on Bob Chapek.
Yeah,
I don't know
a lot of it.
That's not whether that's true or not, but I remember that there being a lot of stuff that's going on, because I was following Kamran and I was following all this. A lot that Bob Iger did. Then Bob Chapek turned a lot of that around, and then all of a sudden Bob Iger is back, and then it seemed like to me a lot of the policies that Iger had previously was like, oh, that was a Chapek thing. that was something
Yeah.
that had been blamed on. And like I said, it was something that was like passing all by my feeds and things like that. I was like, no, wait a minute. I thought that was an Iger thing that was, so to me, it seemed all very shady. When I was like, because I was not following 100% everything, but I did know that, like, okay, here are some things that Iger had done. Bob Chapek was going that now Bob Iger is back, and now a lot of those things are being blamed on Chapek.
Yeah,
it was weird.
It was weird. Go ahead, Retro.
And a lot of the things couldn't have been implemented in the time that Chapek
in that time period, right? You're right. Yeah, exactly.
That was the tip off.
Yeah. So Iger comes back, and this was a shock. I mean, this was a shock to the industry. This was a shock to the fans. There's so-called pixie dusters out there. There's people that really like Disney that were really happy that Iger was coming back. I remember hearing, I think like Clownfish TV. They were like, Bob Chapek is very much a numbers guy. So they weren't too thrilled with him. They saw him as more of a guy who kind of.
A lot of people loved Chapek coming back because he was a numbers guy.
Well, right. So some people like that. Like he moved
I remember
the hierarchy around.
Yeah, I remember when people were talking about the different divisions of Disney, and that like Chapek is going to look at like how many Rey action figures sell.
Right.
They're like, okay, well then if they're not selling, we got a problem here, because some people had said like being a numbers guy for what actually sells is a negative, but a lot of people are like being a numbers guy for what actually sells is an extreme positive, because if things like Cara Dune action figures sell, then a numbers guy is going to be like, let's put Cara Dune in there, because that's what's selling.
Right. So there was kind of a double-edged sword to the numbers guy argument. There was what you're talking about, which is, I think Chapek put distributors in charge of some of the decisions, basically on the lines you're talking about, which is, look, if these toys don't sell, we're not gonna make them. We're not gonna commission these toys to be made.
Right.
We're not gonna ask Hasbro.
Right. That was contrary to the idea of the pure creative, as I understand it. Like, okay, we're going to make this kind of movie with this kind of person because I'm feeling this. I'm going to make this kind of movie with this because I'm feeling that. Like, those people's action figures don't sell. So the contrary way to that, if your numbers guy is like, hey, Cara Dune, that sells, make more of that. And that was supposed to be, according to some, pro-consumer. That like, what do you actually buy? Like, we're not talking about like, oh, what do people actually say? They whatever, but what do they actually buy? Okay, then let's use that to drive making either TV shows or movies.
Star Wars had always been a very robust merchandise empire. I mean, you can almost argue, I don't even think it's an argument. I think it's the truth. Merchandise is what made Lucasfilm as rich as it is. But the merchandise was all based on the strength of the films, what it did to the public imagination, and the beloved response to these films drove toy sales. So now you got Disney making more soulless Star Wars, and ultimately the toys, the merchandising sales dropped off. But now all that's out the window. The guy who started all this came back in, and like Kamran is suggesting as a speculation, maybe it's to kind of plug up all these holes before real damage is done, before too much comes out, because the strange behavior out of Disney and Lucasfilm makes sense if there is something else other than economic profit. And love it. You don't attack your fan base, right? You don't do this if you care about your product. I can't even. So this is evidence to me, at least, whether I know it all or not. This is at least evidence that there's something larger going on behind the scenes that is hard to explain. It was hard for the trades to explain. It was hard for anyone to explain.
And the stories that have been made up still don't explain it. There've been extensive, lengthy breaking. This is what really happened, and none of them still make any sense. The stories don't add up. And for me, again, I'm just looking at things on a practical level, having survived 24 years of this ridiculous industry. I'm, just on the practical level, watching how people stab each other's backs on small TV shows. how they advance. I watch shows where the showrunner gets ousted, so the number 2 has been waiting forever to take their job. I watched it, right? I mean, watch how people do things, right? And I watch how people then use others to achieve their objectives. I've seen all of it, right? So for me, the proof would be, as I started putting out my speculation, is that let's assume that this was Iger trying to cover the ass of the system, right? Or his own ass. Let's say that he got them into FDX, high speculation, right? Then what would he do if I were him in that scenario? I would get someone inside the company once I've been alerted, because what we do know from the original Wall Street Journal reports is that suddenly a few days before Bob Chapek was unceremoniously fired, his CFO, Christine McCarthy, not Karen McCarthy, Christine McCarthy, the CFO of Disney, we know this, she confirmed it, called Bob Iger saying, I need to talk to you about, there's a crisis, right? Chapek isn't working out. So why is she calling this guy? He's not there anymore. Allegedly, he's not there anymore, right? Even though we discovered he was keeping an office on the slot, which isn't normal, right? Whatever. But, so nonetheless, she called him. And this suggests to me a co-conspiratorial situation. Why call this guy? He's not the CEO anymore, right?
Right.
Why? Well, don't you be calling the board members? Why are you calling this guy? She calls him. And that suggested to me that once he's alerted, it's like, okay, our Chapek wants to look at the books, and the books are going to send us all to jail. We can't have that. So Iger's like, well, you know what we have to do. I will call the board. You present something to the board. So we know from the narrative that has been presented that Christine McCarthy, the CFO, went to the board with some kind of emergency. We got to get rid of Chapek. Emergency Saturday meeting with no warning. And that in that meeting, they decided, or Sunday meeting, whatever, they decided on the weekend, we're going to get rid of him. And they unceremoniously fired him. Well, he didn't even know what was happening, right? It was done on the weekend. So we know Christine McCarthy was the person that executed him, that served as the Kingslayer. She's the Kingslayer. I used to call her that on the Patreon, Kingslayer. So, but I said, I said at the time on my Patreon, I speculated, if this is what I think it is, that this is a coup, why Iger attempting to cover himself in return to cover problems on the books that could get him into legal trouble on a scale of billions of dollars. I mean, that's not a joke, right? We're talking about Enron stuff, right? Where people go to jail, right? So it's like, if that's the case, then what is he going to do? Then he's going to get a Kingslayer. And then and why would he get the Kingslayer to put herself in that position? He's going to promise her something. Yeah. If he would promise her, you'll be my successor. She ain't in line for succession. She's the ultimate numbers woman. She doesn't. At least Chapek had run like a division, right? She's literally just a bean counter, right? She wasn't in the line of succession. But he's like, I would promise her. Why would I put myself in potential criminal jeopardy, right? Spend the rest of my life in federal prison. You'll be the CEO of Disney if you do this. You're the next one. All right. Okay, fine. I'll take that. So she goes, she Kingslays him. And then we suddenly notice, if you go back to Wall Street Journal articles, for the several weeks after that, there were all these articles coming out how Christine McCarthy is slated to be the next CEO. And I said, here we go. She ain't in the line of succession. Nobody's been thinking of her as a possibility, but the newspapers are saying she's the number one, and they're doing profiles of her. I mean, she's
right, like it's obvious.
She's an accountant. She ain't going to run Disney, which requires massive social skills, right? And not just looking at numbers. Chapek looked at numbers, but he also knew how to deal with people. He was a manager of a business division. So I was like, this woman is being pushed but I said, but that's not going to stand. You can't let the Kingslayer actually take your job. That's you dangle that, but you have to, in a situation like this, I said, the next thing that has to happen, if this were true, is that Iger has to get rid of her, because she's got the goods on him, right? And he can't allow anybody to have the goods on him. Can't actually let her become the CEO, right? First of all, she doesn't have the skills for it, but he can't actually give her that, because that's a loose end, right? And that's a standard thing. That's the Patsy. That's the Oswald situation.
First rule of an assassination.
Yeah, it's the Oswald. It's like the Patsy. You take this sucker and then you shoot him, right? That's what you do, because the sucker's been arrested and he's going to start saying, well, it was this buddy of mine, this guy. And then suddenly you start unraveling a network that you don't want unraveled, right? And so, Jack Rubenstein, as his name was, blows this guy away, right? Into live television. That's what you do. So I said, what's going to happen is that they're going to Jack Ruby her. She's going to be pushed out. 6 months later, after all of these reports that she's the next CEO, she resigns, claiming health reasons. She just, again, unexpectedly, no warning, she quits. Because I just said, your time's up. Your time's up. I've got this on.
She doesn't have any leverage at that point.
Yeah, because she patsies herself.
Right.
She turned herself into a patsy. And now it's a problem. And so I was like, well, it's playing out the way I would write the screenplay of it to play out if my theory was right. It's playing out exactly that way. So I would be wrong if she was the CEO of Disney today. She's not. She's vanished.
Yeah. So obviously there's trouble in paradise here. The capital city. So while the Red Keep is under fire and there's coups and Kingslayers going on, what's Lucasfilm busy doing at this point? What are they about to? So just to give you a little bit of the timeline here, November 10th, 2022, the FTX scandal breaks. 10 days later, November 20th, Chapek is fired. Iger forces his way back in.
Yeah.
10 days after that, Lucasfilm, all the good work they've been doing, decides to come out with their next show. This is all within 10 days. So at a time
Which I never saw.
Right. So, and we don't have to.
You were not alone. Nobody saw it.
Yeah, I did not. We don't have to spend a lot of time on this.
And nobody can see it. It's not there anymore.
Yeah, it's not there anymore. Right. Yeah.
This is literally a show that they spent, by the way, how much was it? They spent $172.3 million on Willow. $172.3 million on this show. Nobody watched it. It was considered a disaster. And Disney famously or infamously wrote this thing off as a tax write-off because it was more valuable as a tax write-off than it was as actual entertainment. What does that tell you? This show has been stripped and memory hold. You'll never be able to see it again. This is gone. This has been deleted. But then again, it shows to me again, here's a company producing nothing and destroying George Lucas's legacy, by the way. Which, by the way, the original Willow had Val Kilmer in it, and I think Val Kilmer has sadly, tragically passed away.
Listen.
The man was beloved as an actor, and I'll never forget him as Mad Mardigan. So this show doesn't belong attached to Willow. So while this is happening, I'll just say this briefly. The next show to come out, which is January 4th, 2023, is The Bad Batch. Season 2. I like The Bad Batch. So I've been watching these shows, but not a lot of people have. It's kind of quiet. Again, it's in the tradition of Star Wars, The Clone Wars, same kind of animation style. But in March of 2023, as I believe this is a continuation of Order 66, another domino falls shortly after Bob Iger comes back. This is inside Disney. Ike Perlmutter is removed from Disney as well. He was the head of Marvel Entertainment, and some people credit him for keeping, so Marvel, the MCU, from Iron Man all the way to Endgame was pretty great entertainment, really. It didn't have a lot of messaging in it. It was pretty clean cut and beloved by the public. Some people credit Ike Perlmutter as one of the guys that kind of kept those shows grounded. Well, March 2023, he's gone. So you see a pattern here that all these people are getting shipped out, and you're getting more of a, I guess you could say, ideologically aligned consensus amongst Disney. It's now, and you'll see it in Marvel, and it's already been in Lucasfilm, as we've seen almost the entire time, except for perhaps the Favreau camp, which seemed to be a little bit more focused on storytelling, and I would say Star Wars. Now, here's the important thing. Iger is back. And this is going to tie in directly to Star Wars, and I think became a turning point, at least for me. And I think ultimately for the fate of Kathleen Kennedy, I think is about to be dealt into the cards here. So on April 3rd, 2023, there is a annual investor relations call in which Bob Iger, freshly back in charge of Disney, is making all sorts of announcements. We're going to do live action Moana. It's going to star Dwayne Johnson. We're going to do Moana 2. He's throwing all sorts of stuff out there. I listened to the call live. Now, this is April 3rd. He's throwing it all out there. He's got to reassert himself as, the idea guy of Disney. So he's giving us his best shot. He's throwing all these great ideas out there. At the same time, on this call, somebody said, hey, what about Star Wars? And he goes, well, we're going to cool it with Star Wars because Star Wars, we think it's brand fatigue is what he said. He goes, we think we put too much out there too fast. This is like exactly what he said. We put too much out there too fast. The quality took a hit. Now we're going to focus, or we put too much quantity and the quality came down. So we're going to refocus on quality. So we're going to be very cautious going forward with how we handle Star Wars. That was his answer on April 3rd, 2023. 4 days later, there is something very important, which we'll get into. And I think this is important because I do think this is a turning point for the fate of Kathleen Kennedy. 4 days later is the launch of Star Wars Celebration, which is a yearly thing. They announce all their stuff. They get into this. And there was a lot of fanfare. And then behind the scenes, there was some talk that at Star Wars Celebration 2023, which is April 7th at this point, there's been some talk, and Kamran was right in the middle of some of this, that Kathleen Kennedy might be announced at her departure from Lucasfilm. So this makes sense on some level. Star Wars isn't profitable. Lucasfilm is churning out some really limited stuff. They're spending an exorbitant amount of money. And if the FTX scandal and the lack of this special funding, we'll call it, if all that's true, well, then you got to tighten your belt. You can't keep doing Andors and Book of Boba Fett's and Willows. You can't keep doing this for $150 to $200 million to produce stuff that no one likes or buys toys to. Nothing's so. And Bob Iger himself said, we're going to scale back. 4 days before this, we're going to scale back. Now, Kamran, do you want to mention, and Heath, you probably remember some of this as well. Do you want to mention some of the things that was being said kind of behind the scenes leading up to Star Wars Celebration?
Yeah. Well, I'll mention what my inside source said, which led to me a lot of controversy because events went in a bizarrely new direction. But they were telling my inside source in Lucasfilm telling me that, that Ms. Kennedy's departure had been arranged, that Iger had said, look, it's time for you to move on. I'm back. I need to stabilize this company. I've already, I can't do any more of this crap, right? It's time for you to move on. But I'm going to give you a great chance. Let's give you a Viking funeral at Celebration. We're going to do a bunch of press things about all the wonderful stuff you've done, do a lot of interviews. And that's how you do it in Hollywood. That's essentially the gold watch of retirement, when you start getting all these lifetime achievement awards and all these interviews looking at your legacy, right? And that's how you do it to make the person get ready to get off the stage. And I was told that press materials have been prepared for this, all these things, and that it was a done deal and everything was good. And that was what my source and everyone inside of Lucasfilm, or almost everyone inside of Lucasfilm, believed was the understanding. And they were all getting ready for that. And then something surprising happens at Celebration, which even my sources are like, what the hell's happening? We don't know.
Nobody knew. Nobody knew.
Later confirmed by the people involved. Right.
Yes. So during Star Wars Celebration, and now, by the way, I have to just say this: while all of it made sense that Kennedy's time, her strategy, her spendthrift style of Star Wars, it made sense that at this point, when Disney's under such fire, the Reedy Creek district was stripped away. They're at war with the state of Florida. The FTX scandal broke. If there's a connection, that would be a pretty big thing. Bob Iger forces his way back in. Clearly, the financial issue is front and foremost with this issue, and they're going to cool it with Star Wars. And now we're hearing reports that maybe Kennedy might step away at Star Wars Celebration. And at the same time, I remember hearing this. There was reports that there was going to be that Bob Iger was in a meeting and he wanted to make a movie with Rey and Grogu. That he was told. His sources told him that there was going to be a Rey and Grogu movie because those two would sell. That someone did the numbers, and this on paper would sell the most merchandise, would get the most butts and seats in the theater. That this is going to be a big thing. And
does that sound believable to you, Retro Nerd Girl? Does that sound like a financially viable claim that someone had told them that this was going to make money?
No.
No. But that was the report that certain individuals put out there, bizarrely, because no one else had heard it. My sources like, I don't know what they're talking about. Ray ain't no good. Ray's long gone from our system. I don't know where that's coming from. And everybody laughed it off.
They're not even in the same time. They're not even in the same time.
They're not even the same time.
Right. They're not even in the same timeline. It doesn't make sense. But this caused a little bit of a problem in the YouTube sphere because both stories can't be true. If there's going to be a Rey Grogu movie with Lucas in the tradition of the Lucasfilm that has been failing, this is another idea from that Lucasfilm. The only thing that you could say maybe Favreau's attached to is the Grogu side. And by the way, Grogu survives all this, and he is going to be in a movie with Mando. But anyway, at the time there was a rift because it sounded like two competing bits of information. You know, somebody's sources are way off, and this is the way it was being kind of dealt with. And then here at Star Wars Celebration, Daisy Ridley is trotted out in a red dress. And it's announced that Kathleen Kennedy announced that there's going to be a new Rey Skywalker movie. And of course, being in this crowd, everyone goes crazy for this. And what's her name? Charmaine
Obi-Wan, who was the woman in the blue and white
in
on
the blue,
screen.
right? And
Who has never made a movie before.
Yeah,
she's an Oscar-winning documentary filmmaker who's done a couple of episodes of TV that were heavily reshot. She's never made any feature film dramatically, and now she's being given a $200 million movie with Rey.
Right. So at the time, I remember being like, "Oh, Kamran was wrong. Right? Kamran got it wrong.
Sources are lying."
Right. So either Kamran's saying something that's not true, or his sources are telling him something that's not true. So my thought right there was like, "Oh, it looks like Kamran's on the wrong side of this. That sucks. Looks like the other guys had it right." So
they had it right very specifically because nobody was talking about that. It was very specific.
So and it's bizarre though. It was bizarre. Like Retro just said, it doesn't really make sense. So, but this is happening. It's happening. There's Daisy Ridley. So, but then she says that there's no script, which is odd. And by the way,
she says that a few days later. A few days later, people ask her, "Where's the script?"
Right. And the thing that swung me was something that, because Kamran said he believed that Kennedy made this announcement on her own without getting approval from Bob Iger.
Like she did with the Acolyte 18 months before.
Right. My first instinct was he's just reaching. He's reaching.
He's trying to cover his butt because he's been embarrassed.
That's what I thought for sure. But then I remembered something specifically. That investor call 4 days ago, Bob Iger didn't say jack about this.
Yeah.
And he did say that they were scaling back on Star Wars. So what Bob had to, and Bob's desperate for stuff, right? He would have definitely said something at that investor call about a new Star Wars movie. He didn't say a word. And then I started checking the trades every day. I was like, Iger's got to back this up at some point. To my knowledge, I don't think he's ever mentioned this movie once publicly. Has he ever publicly said anything about it? So suddenly I started thinking that maybe Cameron's right. Maybe Kennedy did what she did with Indiana Jones 5 a long time ago, what she did with The Acolyte, announce a movie, force your insist on this, start bringing people in and corner the bosses in order to say, look, you have to fund this movie. It's already been announced. I'm creating
the whole world is excited for it. Not only announced, we've got a director, we've got a writer. This thing is a moving train. You can't, and not only that, the director is a brown feminist Pakistani woman, right? You can't deny her big break. You can't do that because that would be really bad from a DEI perspective. You don't want that kind of PR.
Right. So, but it's a sort of cornering technique where you're creating a story, a narrative. That's actually a different picture. This is not the one I wanted to show. This one. So she's creating kind of this narrative that she's got the good. She's got the good stuff here, and now it's up to Iger to approve this. Well, let me tell you, if Kamran was correct, if Kathleen Kennedy announced something without his approval, if she just went ahead and got Daisy Ridley and Charmaine, I keep messing up the name. I'm so sorry. If she got these people to come on stage with her essentially and announce this and generate basically a career extending announcement, well, then this is going to anger the people above. And this would start to turn people against her if Cameron's right. So that was
by the way. So let me clarify. During this time, when this was announced, I immediately sent out a message to my source saying, "Did you lie to me? Did you jerk me around? Because I look like a jackass in front of the whole world right now. And these other people who are openly calling me a fraud and a liar, who pre-reported this Rey thing, are saying we just proved Cameron is a fraud and a liar." And this person said to me, "I don't know what to tell you. None of us knew this was coming. All we could gather afterwards was that that this was planned secretly by Kennedy and her few inside people, which 9 months later, Daisy Ridley does an interview and she says, nobody knew about this. I didn't know about this. She said the interview, I was having breakfast with Kathleen Kennedy and she said, I've got a surprise for you. We're doing a Ray show. Can you get on stage? And she's like, what? She said that in an interview. Nobody except Kennedy and her immediate inner circle knew this.
Right.
Ridley didn't know. That day she didn't know. So that was what my source said. We don't know. This wasn't in the books as far as we could see. No one's heard of this inside the company. So this must be in Kennedy and one or two close people. And Ridley says, I never heard of this until that morning. That's many months of me being called a fraud later.
Right. There's a problem here, though, when you see this kind of like display. Like they're doing a new movie and you've got a director, you've got an actress. You think in the back of your, these guys got a script going. They know what they're going to do.
It looks legitimate.
They're ready to go. Production's probably in a couple months. Like you really feel like this is going to be a real thing. But now we kind of know like this is all fake because it's just to generate money and buzz around something that may or may not actually exist. And
it's a trap.
But Retro, I know this because I've worked on shows where I saw people do these kind of PR games, not on this scale, but I saw them saying, hey, what if we leak this out? Then we're going to force the executive to do that thing we need them to do, right? I saw them do that because that's a strategy you do. She's ballsy for doing it at this scale, but it's just a strategy that I've witnessed.
So I've actually came up with in my head that this should actually qualify, and I'm not joking. I'm not saying this to make a joke, as a sort of fiction. And like I like to write historical fiction. There's fantasy fiction. There's screenplays. I think media fictions are an actual genre of storytelling because she's storytelling through the media about what's happening at Lucasfilm. She's not, the scripts aren't that good when they do come out, but she's really good at telling. So I remember when Miss Shinoy, is that what is it? Well, anyway, she was on the news. They were interviewing. So this creates buzz. This creates interviews. This gets headlines. That's the storytelling that Miss Kennedy is good at. That is her production. And she's excellent at this. And I think that this was an error, in my opinion. I think this is what sealed her fate going forward. I think that the industry, because she's Hollywood royalty, Miss Kennedy. She's been attached to so many great shows and movies since the late 70s, all the way through Disney's acquisition. And by the way, there was some good stuff that came out of Lucasfilm Disney, but her legacy was pretty much cemented. Even despite all of these missteps with Lucasfilm since 2012, her legacy was cemented. I think this is where the industry was like, oof, you are on your own now. So I think this was a critical error in her staying one fight too long in this. I think 2023 was her natural stopping point. It was the right time economically. It was the right time. Everything was lined up. It was just her time to go in 2023. She said no. This is my opinion, by the way. I can't prove all of this.
Well, I know, but the evidence is largely lining up with that.
Right. The evidence. So this is what is interesting me. It's now, April 2025. It's 2 years later, almost to the day. There's still no script to this movie. This movie does not have a production schedule. The Mandalorian and Grogu is a movie. And I even have a theory that the leak that there was going to be a Rey Grogu movie was actually the Mando Grogu movie. Someone swapped Mando for Rey, which, like Retro said, that doesn't even make sense. But the real news was that there might be a Mando Grogu movie. And that makes sense because there is a script that's in pre-production. It's in production, I think, at this point. And it comes out, it's slated to come out next year. That's happening. This is still in the realm of fiction, media fiction. This is a media fiction. And all the evidence is lined up that this was indeed, in my opinion, a fake announcement. in order to prolong Kathleen Kennedy's career, and also perhaps looking at it from a positive side through her lens, maybe to help the careers of some people, maybe to say, I'm not done yet, and I'll help this activist and I'll help Daisy out. You know, from a positive, maybe she's doing some good in her mind in that direction. But ultimately, I think she was a cat with 9 lives, and this was number 9 in my opinion.
So I want to add to one thing that you circled that you didn't, that I know you know, but let's connect the final dot.
Okay.
So let's go back to the original people that you said came out and said there was a Rey movie coming a few days before this was announced.
Yes.
Since it has now been established from Daisy Ridley herself that she did not know about it, that as far as she was aware, no one inside of Lucasfilm except Kathleen Kennedy and maybe her inner circle knew about it. Where did these YouTubers get that information from? They got it from Kathleen Kennedy's inner circle. These people that have made an entire living off of I hate Kathleen Kennedy. We're talking to people inside of Kathleen Kennedy's inner circle because my people were not in that inner circle and they didn't know about it. So the people who are like, I hate Pablo Hidalgo, I hate Kathleen Kennedy, and making lots of money by making videos on that, somehow had a line directly to Kennedy's inner circle to know this secret that Daisy Ridley herself did not know. So where were their allegiances? Were they with the fandom, or were they always Kathleen Kennedy's people the whole time?
Well, and by the way, there were inroads to you mentioned him, Pablo Hidalgo. There was a stretch there where there was a lot of back and forth between
public conversations between these characters and Hidalgo on Twitter.
Right.
And we're like, why are you talking to this guy? He's your enemy?
Right. So, but it's true. If this announcement was a shock to the system, which it seems like it shocked Iger, it seemed like it shocked everybody, then the only people who knew about it were Kathleen Kennedy's inner circle. So the only people that could have leaked it would have been Kathleen Kennedy's inner circle. So that makes sense to me. That's a logical premise right there. And it makes sense.
And it also makes sense why those people went out of their way to call me a fraud, a liar, and continue to do so 2 years later, have made themselves personal adversaries. Because if you are actually working, if you are actually a double agent and you're working for the other side, and Kamran is consistently trying to be pro Star Wars in the sense of true Star Wars and has some integrity, you got to destroy this guy.
Yeah. Well, and from my standpoint, just as a fan, someone who listens to YouTube and does love Star Wars and has been very critical of Star Wars under Disney and Kennedy's leadership, for me, it was from my point of view, it was just important to know what's going on. I want to know what's going on because Star Wars doesn't make any sense to me. I don't understand the leadership. I don't know why this is continuing to go on. I don't know why Kathleen Kennedy is doing. So for me, I just needed to understand it, and the way Kamran explained it made it make sense to me. And so ever since this moment, I've also kept track of all the news that has come out afterward. And I continually cross-check it with this moment right here. And I would say it completely held up in every corner, whereas this seems to be more of a fabricated movie with no material. This is a movie that exists in headlines. Okay?
Well, and now that writer is long gone.
Right.
And I explained at the time, people were like, why would this well-known writer take on this gig? I said, he used to be a well-known Stephen Knight. He used to be he was an Oscar-winning writer 20 years ago who fell out of the system, became a game show. He created Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. He became a game show guy. And then he eked back into Hollywood by making Peaky Blinders in the UK. And now he wanted to be a big Hollywood player making movies. This was his chance to shine. I said, this guy knows there ain't no movie. But he's going to do this so he can use this to PR himself into other work, which he has subsequently done. And once he got that other work, he announced last year that he quit, that he's no longer there, right? And so there is no movie. There's no writer. There never was.
And even Daisy Ridley's subsequent interviews have been very tacit, very vague, and we'll see what happens, looking forward to it, very, very simple stuff. So, and you don't hear about her being attached to this anymore. The activist, documentarian, you don't hear, you hear about it from once in a while, but there's nothing substantive is my point with this film. But Mandalorian and Grogu comes out next year. That is a real film. And that is a Favreau project. But at this point, and this is where we're going to end this conversation tonight. We saw this glut of content come out. We've seen some major destabilizing elements happen up above at the Disney level, and we've seen that trickle down into the Lucasfilm. And then I think what happened during this Bob Iger coup and return is that she played this big card to extend her time at Lucasfilm and to carry out her vision. And I think this was I believe, a fatal mistake, which we'll explore next week. In the Year of Rebellion, we will get into what happens both at Disney and at Lucasfilm, and we will cover COVID ends with the next discussion. The writer's strike begins. Nelson Peltz comes in. We have Mando season 3 next time. Ahsoka. We have Indiana Jones 5 comes out. So there is a lot. There's a lot of crows that are going to come home to roost in 2023. A lot of these crows come home to roost. And we also have the South Park episode, which comes out. So all of this to me spells doom for this, and I think it will help us and fans understand what might be different this time in 2025 with the end of the Kennedy era, what I believe will be the end of the Kennedy era, and what might come next. But we will continue our coverage next week. So real quick,
All right.
Where can we find you?
Who? Is it me?
Heath. Oh, I'm sorry, Heath. Where can we find you?
You can find me at Heath's Geekverse on YouTube or Table Talk. Look at Table Talk, Deep Conversations, the Geekverse on YouTube. Or, like I said, I have been getting very serious about TikTok lately. So look up Heath's Geekverse on TikTok. Or The Cultists, the show that I created, the mockumentary web show about modern-day Lovecraftian cultists who just want to worship Cthulhu in a world full of people who don't understand. The Cultists is also on TikTok, and it's doing great. So, all right, there
That's
you
awesome.
go.
And Cameron, one more just for
people come to my
your
Patreon,
commentary if they want to follow you.
Yeah, come to my Patreon /Cameron Pasha. I think Patreon /CameronPasha.com. I think that'll get you there. But so come there and there's been an interesting uptick in a lot of my scoops that finally confirmed. Like I said, I've had to endure a lot of you don't know what you're talking about, or you're lying, or whatever. And now, many months later, a lot of stuff is like coming to fruition as I was told, and there's a lot of that. So come learn more about what is coming on the Patreon.
And Retro, where can we find you?
Yes, well, you can find me under Retro Nerd Girl on YouTube and on X.
And real quick, we will be having a movie talk, me, Heath, and Retro on the film Ex Machina. So I'm looking forward to that.
Ex Machina coming soon.
Yeah. Yes, that will be coming soon.
Well, that's it, everybody. Thanks for coming by and listening to this. And we will continue the coverage. We're almost through it. We will continue next week. So have a great night.
Good evening, everyone.